I stood in my new living room, hands gray with dust from assembling cheap furniture. The air smelled of stale paint. Then the door swung open. My billionaire grandmother, Eleanor, stepped inside, her heels clicking against the thin floorboards. She scanned the peeling wallpaper and the second-hand sofa before locking her cold eyes on mine. "So this is what they left you," she asked, "after 10 years of paying their debts. This crumbling house was my only reward. My name is Valerie Ross. I am 32 years old, and for the last 8 years, I have spent my days staring at spreadsheets in the finance department of a private firm called Atlas Meridian Group here in Willowcrest. It is the kind of job where you disappear into the beige walls, where your existence is defined by how well you can balance a ledger that will never belong to you. I am good at it. I am good at making numbers work, at finding the leaks in a budget and patching them up before the ship sinks. It is a skill I did not learn in college, but rather at the kitchen table of my childhood home, trying to figure out how to stretch a $50 grocery budget into a week of meals for 4 people. I stood in the center of what I was now forced to call my living room. This was my new home. It was a bungalow on the wrong side of the tracks, a structure that seemed to be held together by sheer willpower and layers of cheap paint. The air inside smelled of mildew and the sharp, chemical tang of the primer I had spent the last 48 hours applying to the walls. I had bought the paint on sale, a bucket of white that was supposed to brighten the place up, but instead just highlighted how uneven the plaster was beneath it. The house was small. The ceiling was low enough that if I stretched my arms up, my fingertips brushed the popcorn texture that was peeling away in flakes. The floorboards were original, which was a polite way of saying they were warped and screamed in protest every time I took a step. The electrical system was a nightmare of crossed wires and blown fuses. Just yesterday, when I plugged in my vacuum cleaner, the lights in the kitchen had flickered and died, forcing me to spend 2 hours watching a tutorial on my phone about how to change a breaker box switch without electrocuting myself. I did it, though. I fixed it because I had to. There was no money for an electrician. There was no money for a contractor. There was just me, a screwdriver, and the crushing reality that this was it. I wiped my hands on my jeans, leaving a streak of gray dust against the denim. I looked around at the furniture I had managed to scrape together. There was a sofa I had bought from a neighbor for $70, draped in a throw blanket to hide a stain on the left cushion. There was a coffee table I had found on the curb and sanded down until my fingers were raw. There was a single lamp in the corner that cast a dim yellow light over the room. It was pathetic. It was sad. But for the first time in my life, it was quiet. That was the one thing I kept telling myself as I stood there in the silence. It was finally quiet. My phone was sitting on the windowsill, and for the first time in a decade, I was not terrified of it ringing. I was not waiting for the frantic text message from my mother, Caroline, telling me that the electricity was about to be cut off at their house. I was not waiting for a call from my father, Mark, asking if I could just float him $500 until his next big deal came through. I was not waiting for my brother, Logan, to beg me to bail him out of another failed business venture that I had warned him against starting in the first place. I had prepared myself for this. I had mentally packed my bags years ago, even if I had physically stayed. I was ready to be the outcast. I was ready to live in this crumbling box if it meant I never had to transfer another cent of my paycheck to a joint account that I did not control. I was ready to eat toast for dinner and listen to the wind rattle the loose window panes if it meant I could sleep through the night without waking up in a cold sweat about someone else's debt. Then I heard it. It was a sound that did not belong on this street. The cars that usually drove past my house were rusted sedans with mufflers that dragged on the asphalt, or pickup trucks that coughed black smoke into the air. This sound was different. It was a low, powerful purr. The sound of an engine that cost more than this entire neighborhood combined. It was smooth, deep, and predatory. I walked to the window, the floorboards groaning under my weight, and pulled back the thin curtain. A black sedan had pulled up to the curb. It was pristine, the paint shining like liquid ink under the overcast sky. The windows were tinted so dark that they looked like voids. There was no mistaking that car. In a town like Willowcrest, you saw a car like that maybe once a year, and usually, it was just passing through on its way to the highway. But I knew this car. I knew the personalized license plate. It was Eleanor Kingsley. My stomach dropped. My grandmother. The woman the entire town referred to as the real estate queen. The woman my parents spoke about with a mixture of reverence and terror. The billionaire matriarch who sat at the top of our family tree like a hawk watching mice scurry in a field. She did not visit. She did not do drop-ins. Eleanor Kingsley lived in a sprawling estate 2 hours away, a place with iron gates and security guards who checked your ID before they even let you look at the driveway. She moved through the world with appointments, with assistants, with a schedule that was tighter than a bank vault. She certainly did not drive to the crumbling edge of Willowcrest to visit a granddaughter she had barely spoken 10 sentences to in the last 5 years. Something was wrong. That was my first instinct. Someone had died, or someone was in jail, and they needed me to fix it. That was the only reason anyone from my family ever came to find me. I watched as the driver got out, walked around the back, and opened the rear door. Eleanor Kingsley stepped out. She looked completely out of place, like a diamond dropped in a gutter. She was wearing a camel-colored cashmere coat that probably cost $5,000, buttoned over a dark dress. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant twist. She wore sunglasses despite the gray weather, and as she took them off, I saw her eyes. They were gray, sharp, and terrifyingly intelligent. She looked at the peeling paint on my front porch. She looked at the overgrown weeds in the neighbor's yard. She looked at the cracked pavement of the sidewalk. Her expression did not change. It was not disgust. It was not pity. It was simply an assessment. She was appraising the value of her surroundings and coming up with a negative number. I froze. I should have gone to the door. I should have opened it and welcomed her, but I could not move. I looked down at my dirty shirt, my dusty jeans, my hair that I had tied back with a rubber band. I looked at my house, my sad, broken little house, and I felt a wave of shame so hot it burned my throat. I did not want her to see this. I did not want the only person in the family who actually commanded respect to see that this was how I lived. But she was already walking up the path. I heard her heels clicking on the concrete steps. Click, click, click. It sounded like a countdown. She did not knock. She simply turned the handle and opened the door. I had forgotten to lock it. The door swung open, and the cool autumn air rushed in with her, carrying the scent of expensive perfume and rain. She stepped across the threshold and closed the door behind her. The sound of the latch clicking into place seemed to echo in the small room. She stood there for a moment, adjusting her leather gloves. She did not look at me immediately. She looked up at the ceiling, where the water stain from the leak I had patched yesterday was still drying in a brown ring. She looked down at the floor, at the gaps between the boards. She looked at the second-hand sofa with the stain. She walked slowly into the room, her movements precise and graceful. She ran a gloved finger along the top of the television set I had brought from my old apartment, checking for dust. I stood by the kitchen doorway, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt like an intruder in my own home. I felt like I was 12 years old again, waiting to be scolded for something I did not do. "Grandmother," I managed to say. My voice sounded thin and weak in the empty room. She turned to me. Her face was unlined for a woman of her age, preserved by the best dermatologists money could buy, but her eyes were ancient. They were the eyes of a woman who had built an empire from nothing, a woman who knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. She looked me up and down, taking in the dirt on my hands, the exhaustion under my eyes, the way I was unconsciously holding my breath. She did not say hello. She did not ask how I was. She did not ask if I was settling in. She turned back to the room, looking at the dead fireplace that I had stuffed with old newspapers to stop the draft. She looked at the single, lonely window that looked out onto the alleyway where the garbage trucks parked. "So this is what they left you," she said. The words hung in the air, cold and heavy. She did not say we. She said they. She emphasized the word they with a tone that cut through me like a knife. It was a tone of absolute, unadulterated disappointment. But it wasn't disappointment in me. It was something else. It was an accusation. I understood immediately who she meant. She meant my father, Mark. She meant my mother, Caroline. She meant my brother, Logan, my parents, and my brother. The people I had spent my entire adult life protecting. The people I had starved myself for. The people whose credit scores I had saved while ruining my own. The people who had sat in a lawyer's office 3 days ago, listening to the preliminary reading of a trust fund distribution that I was excluded from, and smiled as they handed me the deed to this derelict shack as a consolation prize. "Yes," I whispered. "This is it." I felt the shame curdle into something else. Anger. I felt a sudden, sharp spike of rage. Why was she here? Was she here to mock me? Was she here to see the final punchline of the joke that was my life? Was it not enough that I had been cast aside? Did she have to come here in her $5,000 coat to witness the squalor personally? "I am fixing it up," I said, my voice a little stronger this time, defensive. "It has good bones. I can make it work. I do not need anything else." Eleanor ignored my defense. She walked over to the wall where the plaster was cracked in a jagged line that looked like a lightning bolt. She reached out and pressed her hand against the wall, feeling the cold dampness seeping through. "You paid for your brother's tuition when he dropped out of 3 different colleges," she stated. It was not a question. "You paid the mortgage on your parents' house for 6 months in 2019 when Mark made that bad investment in lithium mines. You paid for your mother's surgery because they had let their insurance lapse. You have been transferring 40% of your salary to them every month for 7 years. I stared at her. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. How did she know that I had never told anyone? I had kept it secret. I had hidden the transactions. I had lied to my friends. I had lied to my colleagues. I had borne the burden in silence because that is what you do. You do not shame your family. You fix it. You hold the pillar up until your back breaks, and you do not complain. I stammered. I did what I had to do. And this, she said, sweeping her hand around the room, gesturing at the rotting floorboards and the stained ceiling, is your return on investment. She turned her gaze back to me. It was intense, unblinking. It stripped me bare. It made me feel exposed in a way I had never felt before. A house that is falling down, she said softly, for the daughter who held everything up. I looked away. I could not hold her gaze. My eyes stung. I blinked rapidly, refusing to cry. I would not cry in front of her. I would not cry in front of anyone. I had cried enough in the shower where no one could hear me. It is fine, I said, lying through my teeth. I am fine. I have a roof over my head. I have my job. I am free of them now. That is what matters. Eleanor let out a sound that was almost a laugh, but it had no humor in it. It was a dry, sharp exhale. Free, she repeated. You think you are free because they gave you a shack and forgot about you. You think this is freedom. Valerie. She took a step closer to me. The smell of her perfume was overwhelming now, rich and complex, smelling of sandalwood and old money. You are not free, she said. You are discarded. There is a difference. The word hit me in the chest. Discarded. That was the truth I'd been trying to hide from myself. I wanted to believe I was independent. I wanted to believe I was starting over. But the truth was simpler and much more brutal. They had used me up. They had squeezed every drop of utility out of me, drained my bank account, drained my energy, drained my youth, and when there was nothing left to take, when a sudden windfall from the estate restructuring promised them millions, they had cut me loose with a piece of garbage property so they would not have to look at me anymore. I was the booster rocket that falls into the ocean once the shuttle reaches orbit. I was the scaffolding that gets torn down once the building is finished. I looked at my grandmother, and for the first time, I saw something other than coldness in her eyes. I saw recognition. She was not looking at a victim. She was looking at a wasted asset. Why are you here, grandmother? I asked. If you know everything, then you know I have nothing to give you. I have no money. I have no influence. I have this house, and that is it. If you came to tell me I'm a fool, you can save your breath. I know." She looked at me for a long time. The silence stretched out, filled only by the ticking of the cheap clock I had hung on the kitchen wall. "I did not come to tell you that you are a fool," she said. "I came to see if you were angry yet." I blinked. "What?" "Anger," she said calmly. "It is a useful emotion. It clears the mind. It burns away the guilt. Sadness is useless. Regret is a waste of time. But anger can build empires or destroy them." She looked around the room one last time, her expression unreadable. "I have watched this family for a long time," she said. "I have watched your father pretend he is a businessman while he gambles away his inheritance. I have watched your mother pretend she is a socialite while she begs her daughter for grocery money. I have watched your brother pretend he is a genius while he steals from his own sister." She paused, and her voice dropped an octave, becoming steel. "And I have watched you let them do it." I flinched. It was true. I had let them. I had thought it was love. I had thought it was duty. "But today," she said, "I walked into this house, and I saw what their gratitude looks like. It looks like dry rot. It looks like poverty." She reached into her expensive coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She placed it on the dusty table I had sanded with my own hands. "You have spent your life being the invisible pillar," she said. "You held the roof up so they could dance on the floor. But what happens when the pillar decides to move? What happens to the house then?" She did not wait for an answer. She turned and walked towards the door. Her visit had lasted less than 10 minutes, but it had changed the air in the room. The smell of mildew was gone, replaced by the scent of a storm coming. "Think about it, Valerie," she said without looking back. "And when you are done thinking, read that paper." She opened the door and stepped out into the gray afternoon. I watched her walk down the path, her spine straight, her head held high. She got into the black sedan. The door closed with a solid thud, and the car drove away, disappearing around the corner as silently as a ghost. I stood there alone in the silence, but it was not the same silence as before. It was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a fuse burning down. I looked at the paper on the table. I looked at the walls I had painted. I looked at my hands, still gray with dust. This is not just a story about a bad inheritance. If you are reading this, and you are the one who always pays the check, the one who always answers the phone at 2 a.m, the one who fixes the messes you did not make, then listen to me. This is a story about what happens when you finally stop. My grandmother asked me if this was what they left me. She was right, but she was also wrong. They didn't just leave me a broken house. They left me with the truth. And the truth is a dangerous thing to give to a person who has nothing left to lose. I remember thinking back, trying to pinpoint the exact moment I should have known it would end this way. It wasn't the reading of the will. It wasn't the day I moved in here. Before my grandmother asked me that question, there was a Christmas Eve 2 years ago. The snow was falling outside, and the fire was roaring in my parents' house, the house I had paid the heating bill for that month. My father, Mark, had stood up at the head of the table. He was wearing a new suit that I had put on my credit card because he said he needed it for a meeting. He raised his glass of expensive wine, his face flushed with drink and self-satisfaction. He looked around the table at my mother, at my brother Logan, and then his eyes slid over me like I was a piece of furniture. He smiled, a wet, loose smile, and said the words that I had buried deep inside me until this very moment. He looked right at me and said, "You know, Valerie, sometimes I look at this family, at the success we are meant for, and I think, you really do not belong in this picture. You are just too ordinary." He had laughed. My mother had laughed. Logan had laughed. And I had sat there, holding my fork, and smiled with them. That was the night I should have walked away. But I didn't. I stayed. I paid. I fixed. Until now. To understand how I ended up standing in a rotting house with nothing to show for a decade of sacrifice. You have to understand the architecture of my childhood. It was not built on hatred. If my parents had beaten me or starved me, I might have left sooner. I might have run away at 16 and never looked back. But the damage they did was far more subtle. It was structural. They built a family where I was the foundation and my brother, Logan, was the view. And as anyone in construction will tell you, the foundation is designed to be buried. I grew up in a standard suburban house in Willowcrest, with a manicured lawn and a 2-car garage. It was the kind of house where the curtains were always drawn just right to hide the dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun. From the outside, we were the perfect American family. Mark, the hardworking father who was always one deal away from striking it rich. Caroline, the devoted mother who kept the social calendar full. Logan, the golden boy. And then there was me, Valerie, the girl who was simply there. Logan was 2 years younger than me, but from the moment he was born, he took up all the oxygen in the room. He was a colicky baby, a toddler who threw tantrums that could shatter glass, and a child who was described by every teacher as sensitive and high-spirited. In our house, sensitive was a code word. It meant that Logan could not be upset. It meant that the world had to rearrange itself to fit his mood. If Logan wanted pizza for dinner, we had pizza. Even if I had asked for spaghetti 3 nights in a row, if Logan wanted to watch cartoons, the television was his. If Logan needed the larger bedroom because he needed space for his drum set, or his easel, or whatever hobby he had picked up that week, I was moved to the smaller room down the hall without a discussion. I learned the art of yielding before I learned how to do long division. It became a reflex. I would step back so he could step forward. I would be quiet so he could be loud. I remember being 8 years old and standing on a stool in the kitchen, making my own toast because my mother was busy trying to convince Logan to put on his shoes. I buttered the bread carefully, washed the knife, and dried it. I ate standing up over the sink so I would not leave crumbs on the table. When my mother finally came in, flushed and harried after getting Logan into the car, she looked at me and sighed in relief. "Look at you," she said. "You are all ready. You are such a big girl. You never give me any trouble." She said it like a compliment. I took it like a medal. I did not know then that she was training me. She was teaching me that the only way to get her approval was to require absolutely nothing from her. By the time I was 10, I was the invisible machinery of the household. I did my own laundry. I cleaned my own room. I packed my own lunch, but it did not stop there. Slowly, the boundaries of my responsibilities began to expand like a stain. I started folding the towels for the whole house because my mother said I folded them neater. I started loading the dishwasher after dinner because my father said he was too tired from work. I started checking Logan's homework because my parents said they did not understand the new math. And I was so smart, so capable. I remember one afternoon vividly. I was sitting on the living room floor, folding a pile of Logan's clothes. He was sitting on the sofa just 3 feet away, playing a video game. The sound of the electronic explosions filled the room. He was 12, perfectly capable of folding a shirt, but nobody had ever asked him to. I picked up his soccer jersey, the expensive one my father had bought him after he scored a single goal in a season of mediocre playing. I smoothed out the wrinkles and folded it into a perfect square. My mother was on the phone in the kitchen. The door was open, and I could hear her talking to Mrs. Gable from next door. "Valerie is such a blessing," my mother said. Her voice was light, airy. "She is so independent. I never have to worry about her. She just handles things. But Logan, you know, he is different. He is so sensitive. He feels things deeply. He needs a lot of support right now. The school system just is not designed for a creative mind like his." I sat there, holding my brother's jersey, and felt a strange coldness settle in my chest. Independent. That was the word they used to dress up their neglect. They called me independent, so they did not have to feel guilty about ignoring me. They called Logan sensitive, so they did not have to feel guilty about spoiling him. My father had his own version of this narrative. Mark Ross was a man who loved to hear himself talk, especially when he had an audience. At family barbecues, he would wrap an arm around my shoulder, squeezing just a little too tight, and announced to his friends that they were lucky. "We are so lucky to have a daughter who never needs help," he would say. "She is low maintenance, like a Honda. She just runs." Everyone would laugh. I would smile, because that is what the good daughter did. But inside, I wanted to scream. I did not want to be a Honda. I wanted to be a person. I wanted someone to ask me if I was tired. I wanted someone to check my homework not because I needed help, but because they were interested in what I was learning. But in the Ross household, needs were a finite resource. There was only enough attention for one child, and Logan consumed it all. There was a Saturday when I was 12. My father had managed to get tickets to a Major League Baseball game in the city. It was a big deal. He had been talking about it for weeks. I loved baseball. I knew all the stats. I had a scrapbook of clippings in my drawer that nobody knew about. The morning of the game, I woke up early and put on my cap. I sat on the stairs, waiting. My father came out of his bedroom, looking stressed. My mother was behind him, looking apologetic. "Valerie, honey," my father said, not meeting my eyes. "We have a problem. Your Uncle Jerry is in town and he wants to come with us. And he is bringing his new girlfriend." I waited. I gripped the banister. "We only have 4 tickets," he said. The math was simple. Dad, Mom, Logan, Uncle Jerry. The girlfriend would have to buy her own. Or maybe they had 5. It did not matter. The math always ended with me being the remainder. "Logan really needs this," my mother added quickly. "He has been having such a hard time with his piano lessons. He needs a win. You understand, don't you? Val. You are the reasonable one. You understand, don't you?" That phrase was the chisel they used to chip away at my desires. If I said no, if I cried, I would stop being the reasonable one. I would stop being the independent one. I would become just another problem they had to solve. And I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that they did not have the energy to solve me. So I took off my cap. I forced a smile. "It is okay," I said. "I have a book I want to read anyway." My father let out a breath he had been holding. "That is my girl," he said. "No drama." They left. I watched the car pull out of the driveway. Logan sitting in the back seat with a grin on his face. He did not even like baseball. He would spend the whole game complaining about the heat and asking for hot dogs. I went back to my room and tore the pages out of my scrapbook one by one. I did not cry. I just destroyed the evidence that I had ever wanted anything in the first place. As we got older, the dynamic shifted from emotional space to financial space. I became the keeper of secrets. My parents were terrible with money. They bought things to project an image of success they did not have. New cars, club memberships, vacations we could not afford. I would hear them arguing late at night through the thin walls. "We are overdrawn again. Mark," my mother would hiss, "it is an investment." "Caroline," he would snap back, "you have to spend money to make money." The next morning, they would come down to breakfast acting as if nothing was wrong. But I knew. I knew because I was the one who got the mail before they came home. I saw the late notices in the red envelopes. I saw the final warnings from the utility companies. I never opened them, but I left them in a stack on the counter. Silent sentinels of our reality. But whenever Logan wanted something, the money miraculously appeared. When he decided he wanted to be a guitarist, my father bought him a Fender Stratocaster that cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. "Where did we get the money for that?" I asked my mother once, watching Logan pose with the guitar in front of the mirror. "Your father worked it out," she said vaguely. "Don't worry about it. Valerie, why are you always so serious about money? You are too young to be such a penny pincher." I was 14. I was wearing sneakers with holes in the toes because I had not asked for new ones. I was not a penny pincher. I was terrified. I was watching the water rise around us while my family poked holes in the boat. Then there was my grandmother, Eleanor Kingsley. She was a myth in our house, a legend. We knew she was rich, though we did not know the extent of it back then. She lived in a different city, a place that sounded like another planet. She rarely visited. When she did, the house went into a panic. My mother would spend days cleaning, scrubbing baseboards, hiding the piles of unpaid bills. My father would get a haircut and put on his best suit. Eleanor was terrifying. She was not a grandmother who baked cookies. She was a grandmother who inspected the dust on the mantelpiece. When she arrived, the air in the house changed. It became thinner, sharper. I remember one visit when I was 15. Eleanor arrived in her black car, carrying 2 boxes wrapped in silver paper. She sat in the living room, drinking tea that my mother had served in the good china that we were never allowed to touch. She called us over. Logan went first. Of course, he threw himself onto the sofa next to her. Charming and loud. He opened his box. It was a rare coin set, gold and heavy. "For your future," Eleanor said. My father's eyes lit up. He practically vibrated with greed. Then it was my turn. I opened my box carefully. Inside was a savings bond in my name. It was not flashy. It was practical. It was substantial. "Thank you, grandmother," I said. She looked at me. Her eyes were the same gray as mine. "You are quiet," she observed. "She is the sturdy one." My father interjected quickly. He reached out and took the bond from my hand, and the coins from Logan. "We will keep these safe for you kids," he said. "We don't want you losing them." Eleanor watched him take the gifts. She did not say anything, but her gaze lingered on his hands. Then she looked back at me. "How are your grades?" she asked. "Straight A's." My mother answered for me. "Valerie is very academic. We do not have to worry about her. She is on autopilot. But Logan, tell Grandma about your art project. The teacher said he has a unique vision that the curriculum just stifles." And just like that, I was dismissed. I was the autopilot. I was the machine that ran itself. The conversation shifted to Logan's genius, Logan's potential, Logan's need for a special summer camp that cost $3,000. I sat there and listened to them rewrite reality. In their version of the world, I was fine. I was always fine. I was so fine that I did not need attention, or gifts, or support, and Logan was so special that he needed everything. Later that night, I heard my father in the kitchen. I went down to get a glass of water and stopped in the hallway. He was on the phone, probably with one of his creditors. "I can get you the cash next week," he was saying. "I have some assets I can liquidate. Just a couple of family gifts. It is not a problem." He was selling the coins, and he was cashing my bond. I stood in the dark hallway, my hand hovering over the light switch. I should have walked in there. I should have screamed. I should have told him that was mine. But I didn't. I turned around and went back up the stairs. I told myself it was for the family. I told myself that if I made a scene, my mother would cry, and my father would yell, and the fragile peace of our house would shatter. That was the lie I told myself to survive. I told myself that my silence was a virtue. I told myself that being the one who sacrificed made me better than them. It made me strong. But I was wrong. It did not make me strong. It made me a target. It taught them that they could take from me and I would not bite back. It taught them that my boundaries were made of smoke. It taught them that Valerie Ross was a natural resource, like water or air, existing solely to sustain them. I remember graduating high school. I was valedictorian. I gave a speech about responsibility and the future. My parents sat in the front row. They clapped. They took pictures. But on the ride home, the conversation was entirely about Logan. He had failed 2 classes and would have to go to summer school, and my parents were discussing how unfair the teachers were, how they were targeting him. "We should sue the district," my father said, loosening his tie. "They are discriminating against his learning style." "Valerie," my mother said, turning around in the front seat, "you can help him this summer, right? You can tutor him. You are so good at explaining things. It would save us the money of hiring someone." I looked out the window at the passing houses. I had just graduated at the top of my class. I had a scholarship to university in the fall. I had worked for 4 years to get out, and their graduation gift to me was a job. Their gift was the responsibility of fixing the brother who had spent the last 4 years playing video games while I studied. "Sure," I said. "I can help. Good girl," my father said. The pain I felt wasn't a sharp, stabbing sensation. It was a dull, heavy ache. It was the feeling of being slowly erased. It was the realization that no matter how high I climbed, no matter how hard I worked, in their eyes, I would never be the protagonist of the story. I was the supporting character. I was the reliable best friend. I was the bank. I was the backup plan. I did not know it then. But that car ride was the blueprint for the next 14 years of my life. I had been conditioned to believe that strong people are not allowed to need anyone. I had been taught that love was a transaction where I paid and they received. I looked at my reflection in the car window. I looked calm. I looked steady. I looked like the daughter who never needed help. If I could go back to that girl, to that 18-year-old in the cap and gown, I would not tell her to run. She would not have listened. I would tell her to scream. I would tell her to break something. I would tell her that being the pillar is not an honor when the temple is built on quicksand. But I stayed silent. And the car drove on, carrying us toward a future where I would give them everything I had, until the only thing left was a crumbling house and a question from an old woman who saw right through me. University was supposed to be my escape velocity. I had earned a scholarship that covered tuition, and I worked 3 part-time jobs to cover room and board. I waited tables at a diner that smelled permanently of burnt grease. I shelved books in the library until my fingers were dry and cracked, and I tutored freshmen who had partied too hard and studied too little. I was sleeping 4 hours a night. I was surviving on instant noodles and free coffee from the student lounge, but I was out. I was in a dorm room 3 hours away from Willowcrest, and I thought that distance would finally equal freedom. I was wrong. While I was pulling double shifts to pay for textbooks, Logan was dropping out of his first community college. He said the environment was toxic. He said the professors did not understand his unique perspective. My parents nodded sympathetically. They told everyone that the academic system was too rigid for a creative spirit like Logan. They said some people just are not born to sit in a classroom. They brought him home, set him up in the guest room, and bought him a new gaming console to help him decompress from the trauma of having to attend 3 weeks of Introduction to Psychology. My phone would ring on Tuesday nights. It was always Tuesday, because that was when my father's credit card bill was due. "Valerie, sweetheart," my mother would say, her voice tight with a manufactured panic. "We are in a bit of a bind. Dad's commission check got delayed again. The accounting department is such a mess. We just need $200 to keep the lights on until Friday. Just until Friday. We will pay you back the second the check clears." I was 19 years old. I had $300 in my bank account. $200 was my food budget for the month. It was my emergency fund. It was everything I had, but I sent it. I transferred the money. I ate plain rice for 3 weeks. I walked to work instead of taking the bus to save the fare. I did it because I could hear the fear in her voice, and I had been trained to fix it. I did it because I knew that if the lights went out, it would somehow be my fault for not stopping it. The money never came back on Friday. It never came back at all. When I asked about it weeks later, my mother sighed. "Oh, Valerie, do not be petty. We bought groceries. You do not want your brother to starve, do you?" That was the pattern. I was the backup generator that kicked in whenever their main power failed, which was constantly. I paid for my mother's blood pressure medication when she claimed the pharmacy made a mistake with the insurance. I paid off a credit card debt my father had run up buying a set of golf clubs he claimed were essential for networking. I paid, and I paid, and I paid. When I graduated and landed a job at Atlas Meridian Group, the dynamic did not change. It solidified. Atlas Meridian was not a glamorous firm. It was a mid-sized company with gray carpets and fluorescent lights that hummed with a low, headache-inducing frequency. My starting salary was modest, but it was steady. It was reliable. To my parents, that job offer was not a milestone in my career. It was a notification that their safety net had just been upgraded. They did not congratulate me on the position. They congratulated themselves on finally having a daughter who was settled. "Thank goodness," my father said when I told him the news. "Now we can breathe a little easier. It is good to know one of you has a steady head on your shoulders." He did not mean he was proud. He meant he was relieved he had a new line of credit. While I was learning how to navigate corporate finance, Logan was navigating a series of spectacular failures. First, it was the music studio. He decided he was going to be a producer. He needed equipment. He needed soundproofing. He needed microphones that cost more than my first car. My parents refinanced their house to give him the seed money. 6 months later, the equipment was sold for pennies on the dollar at a pawn shop because Logan realized the music industry was too political. Then it was the online vintage clothing store. He needed inventory. He needed a warehouse space. He needed a professional photographer. My mother maxed out 2 credit cards to fund it. 3 months later, the garage was full of moth-eaten coats that nobody wanted, and Logan was bored. Then came the startup, the big idea, the app that was going to revolutionize the way people walk their dogs, or bought groceries, or something equally vague. This time, the bank said no. My parents had ruined their credit score. They had tapped out their home equity, so they came to me. It was a Sunday dinner. I had driven down from the city, exhausted after a 60-hour work week. I was wearing a suit I had bought at a thrift store and tailored myself. I sat at the table, and they pitched me. Logan did the talking. He had a PowerPoint presentation printed out on copy paper. He used buzzwords he had learned from YouTube videos. Synergy, scalability, disruption. He looked manic, his eyes shining with the delusion of grandeur that my parents had fed him since birth. "We just need a bridge loan. Val," he said. "Just $10,000 to get the prototype finished. Investors are lining up. I just need to show them the beta version. You will get your money back with interest. Triple the investment. Guaranteed." I looked at him. I looked at the pile of unpaid bills I knew was sitting in the drawer in the hallway. "I cannot do that. Logan," I said, "I do not have $10,000 lying around." Then my mother leaned forward. She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her palm was warm, clammy. "We are not asking for cash. Honey," she said softly, "we just need a cosigner. The bank needs someone with a steady income to guarantee the loan. You just have to sign a piece of paper. That is all. Logan will make the payments. You will never even have to think about it." I looked at my father. He was not looking at me. He was cutting his steak with aggressive precision. "Come on, Valerie," he said. "Do not be selfish. Your brother is on the verge of something huge. You are the big sister. It is your job to help him up." I tried to say no. I tried to explain debt-to-income ratios. I tried to explain risk, but they wore me down. They chipped away at my resistance with guilt. "You know how fragile he is right now," my mother whispered to me in the kitchen while we were clearing the plates. "If this fails, I do not know what he will do. He has been so depressed. Val, he talks about ending things. You do not want that on your conscience, do you?" The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It was the ultimate trump card. If I said no, and he hurt himself, I would be the murderer. So I signed. I walked into the bank with them the next day and I signed my name on the dotted line. I used my credit, my good name, my hard work, to guarantee a loan for a boy who had never finished a project in his life. Of course, the money never came back. The app never launched. The investors never materialized. And 3 months later, the first overdue notice arrived in my mailbox. Logan had stopped paying. He had not even told me. When I called him, he was defensive. The market shifted. "Val, it is not my fault. I need a pivot. I need more time." When I called my parents, they were dismissive. "Why are you harassing him?" my mother asked. "He is trying his best. Can't you just cover it for a few months? You have that nice job. You do not have kids. What else are you spending your money on?" What else was I spending my money on? I was not spending it on vacations. While my colleagues were booking flights to Bali and Tulum, posting photos of their feet in the sand, I was sitting in my cubicle eating a sandwich I had made at home. I was not spending it on clothes. I wore the same 3 suits in rotation until the elbows shined. I was not spending it on a social life. I turned down every invitation for drinks, every dinner party, every movie night, because I could not afford to buy a round or split an appetizer. I was spending my money on their mistakes. I was spending my money to keep the repo man away from my parents' car. I was spending my money to keep Logan's credit score from tanking, while mine slowly bled out. I started taking on freelance work. I spent my weekends doing bookkeeping for small businesses, staring at receipts until my eyes burned. I worked 7 days a week. I became a ghost in my own life. I was 26, then 28, then 30. My 20s evaporated into a gray mist of work and anxiety. The exhaustion was not just physical, it was existential. It was the feeling of being hollowed out. Every time I transferred money, I waited for a thank you. Just a simple acknowledgement. Just one sentence that said, "We know this is hard for you. We appreciate it." It never came. The transactions had become invisible to them. The money simply appeared in their accounts, and they spent it as if it were manna from heaven. If I was a day late, I got a text. "Where is it?" "We have a late fee coming up." "No." "Hello." "No." "How are you?" "No, I love you." Just where is it? I remember one particular Thanksgiving. I had driven home, my car trunk filled with groceries because I knew their refrigerator would be empty. I spent 6 hours cooking. I made the turkey. I made the stuffing. I made the pies. My mother sat at the table, holding a glass of wine I had paid for. She was talking to her sister, my Aunt Josephine. They were talking about the future. "We are just holding on until Mother goes," my mother said, referring to Grandma Eleanor. It sounds terrible to say, but it is the truth. When that estate settles, everything will be different. We will be able to pay everything off. Logan was nodding. "Yeah," he said. "I have got big plans for that capital. Real estate, tech. It is going to be huge." "And what about Valerie?" Aunt Josephine asked. She glanced at me. I was at the sink, scrubbing a roasting pan that was caked with grease. My mother laughed. It was a light, tinkering sound that made my blood freeze. "Oh, Valerie is fine," she said. "She is built for this. She is not like Logan. She is sturdy. God gave her the capacity to carry things. She does not need the help. She is the one who helps." I stopped scrubbing. I stood there, my hands submerged in the dirty, lukewarm water. Sturdy. That was it. That was how they saw me. I was not a person with dreams. I was not a woman who wanted to travel, or fall in love, or buy a house with a garden. I was a beast of burden. I was a mule. I was a tool they used to bridge the gap between their reality and their delusions. They believed that my suffering was my purpose. They believed that my ability to endure pain was a divine gift, not a survival mechanism I had been forced to develop because of their neglect. I looked at them. My father was asleep in the armchair. Logan was checking his phone. My mother was pouring another glass of wine. They were waiting for Eleanor to die so they could be rich, and they were using me to keep them comfortable while they waited. I was the waiting room furniture. I dried my hands. I walked out of the kitchen. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to tell them that I was drowning, that I woke up every morning with a knot of panic in my chest, that I hated my job, that I was lonely, that I was tired of being the adult for 4 people. But I didn't. I went upstairs to my old room, the small one, and I sat on the bed. I opened my banking app on my phone. I saw the balance. It was pathetic. I saw the pending transfer for Logan's car insurance. I should have canceled it then. I should have cut them off that night. But the indoctrination ran deep. I still believed the lie. I still believed that family was everything. I still believed that if I just worked a little harder, if I just saved a little more, if I just fixed one more crisis, eventually they would see me. Eventually, they would love me for me, not for what I could provide. I was a fool. I was a banker for a family of thieves, and I did not even charge interest. The anger I feel now is hot and sharp, but back then, it was just a heavy yound stone in my gut. I told myself it was responsibility. I told myself I was the good daughter. I did not know yet that there is a difference between being good and being used. I did not know that you cannot save people who are addicted to being rescued. I kept paying. I kept working. I kept fading away. Until the day the money wasn't the problem anymore. Until the day the currency changed from dollars to self-respect. And that exchange rate is brutal. For years. Eleanor Kingsley was just a name on a Christmas card, and a terrifying presence at occasional family gatherings. We knew she was comfortable. We knew she had done well for herself after grandfather passed away. But in our family, money was always discussed in hushed tones or loud, desperate arguments. So the specifics of her situation were murky. It was only as I entered my 30s that the whispers in the extended family began to change frequency. They stopped sounding like gossip and started sounding like awe. The rumors trickled down through distant cousins and awestruck aunts. Eleanor did not just own a house, she owned entire subdivisions. She did not just have savings, she held majority shares in construction firms and hotel chains across the state. She was what the financial magazines called a silent giant. She was a billionaire who drove a 10-year-old car when she felt like it and refused to give interviews. When the invitation arrived, it felt less like a request for a visit and more like a summons to a royal court. We were invited to her lakeside estate for the weekend. I had never even known she had a lakeside estate. To me, she was just the woman who lived in the city and sent savings bonds I was not allowed to keep. The drive there was suffocating. My father, Mark, spent the entire 2 hours coaching us. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror every 5 minutes, smoothing back his thinning hair. "Remember," he said, his voice tight with nervous energy, "we are successful. We are doing great. Logan, tell her about the expansion plans for your brand. Caroline, mention the charity board you are thinking of joining. And Valerie?" He paused, looking at me in the back seat. I was wearing a simple navy dress, the most expensive thing I owned, which I had bought on clearance. "Valerie, just try to look happy. Do not bore her with details about your job. She does not need to hear about payroll processing. Just smile and nod." We pulled up to the gates, just as the sun was beginning to dip below the tree line. The estate was not just a house, it was a statement. The gates were wrought iron, twisting into shapes that looked like vines and thorns. They swung open silently, controlled by some invisible security system. The driveway was paved with cobblestones that rumbled beneath our tires, winding through a forest of maple trees that were burning red with autumn leaves. When the house came into view, I felt the air leave my lungs. It was a sprawling stone mansion that looked like it had grown out of the earth itself. It faced a massive steel-gray lake that stretched out to the horizon. The windows were 2 stories high, reflecting the clouds. It was beautiful, but it was cold. It was a house designed for power, not for comfort. It was a place where you made decisions that affected thousands of people, not a place where you watched television in your pajamas. We parked next to a fountain that was quietly bubbling in the center of the circular driveway. A valet appeared from nowhere to take the keys. My father handed them over with a flourish, acting as if he was used to this kind of service, though I saw his hand tremble slightly. Eleanor was waiting for us in the foyer. The space was cavernous, with a chandelier that looked like a frozen explosion of crystal hanging from the ceiling. The floor was marble, polished to a mirror shine. "Welcome," she said. Her voice echoed slightly. She did not hug us. She offered her cheek to my mother, shook my father's hand, and nodded at Logan and me. We were ushered into the main living room, a space dominated by a fireplace big enough to roast a whole pig. There were paintings on the walls that I recognized from art history books, real ones, not prints. From the moment we sat down, the dynamic was set. My parents flanked Logan like bodyguards protecting a VIP. They pushed him forward on the velvet sofa, making sure he was the center of Eleanor's line of sight. "Logan is working on something truly revolutionary." "Mother," Caroline said, leaning forward, "he has a vision for the tech sector that is going to change everything." Eleanor sat in a high-backed wing chair, sipping black tea. She looked at Logan over the rim of her cup. "Is that so?" she asked. "Tell me about your business plan." Logan launched into his speech. It was the same speech he had given me 100 times when he needed money, but polished with bigger words. He talked about disrupting the marketplace. He talked about vertical integration. He talked about the potential for exponential growth. He used every buzzword in the dictionary, but he said absolutely nothing of substance. I watched Eleanor. Her face was a mask. She did not smile. She did not frown. She simply watched him, her gray eyes unblinking. "And what is your current revenue stream?" she asked calmly during a pause in his monologue. Logan stumbled. "Well, we are in the pre-revenue phase. Grandmother, it is all about user acquisition right now. We are building the community. The monetization comes later." "Ah," Eleanor said. "Pre-revenue. That is a very popular phase. It usually lasts until the investors run out of patience." My father laughed a little too loudly. "Oh, Mother, you know how the modern economy works. It is different from real estate. You have to capture the mindshare first. Logan is a genius at that. He has always been the visionary of the family." Then, Eleanor turned her eyes to me. I was sitting on a small ottoman off to the side, trying to make myself as small as possible. "And you, Valerie?" she asked. "Are you disrupting anything?" I froze. My mother shot me a warning look. "No, Grandmother," I said. "I am still at Atlas Meridian, in the finance department." She set her teacup down on the saucer with a sharp clink. "I know where you work," she said. "I asked what you're doing. Are you saving?" "Yes," I said. "What percentage of your income?" she asked. It was a rude question. It was a direct question. But looking at her, I realized she was not making conversation. She was auditing me. 20%. I lied. It was actually closer to 40%. But 35 of that went immediately to my parents and Logan. I kept 5% for myself, if I was lucky. She looked at me for a long moment. 20% is a good start, she said, provided you are actually keeping it. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My mother shifted uncomfortably. "Of course she keeps it," Mark said quickly. "Valerie is very frugal. She lives like a nun. She does not have the appetite for life that Logan has." I looked down at my hands. The appetite for life. That was what they called his recklessness. That was what they called his spending. Dinner was served in a dining room that could have seated 30 people. We were only 5. The table was set with silver that was heavy in my hand. The food was exquisite. Some kind of roasted duck with a sauce I could not identify. But I could barely taste it. I was too busy monitoring the mood of the table. I watched my parents perform. They ate with exaggerated elegance, complimenting the chef, complimenting the decor, complimenting the wine. They were desperate to show that they belonged here. They were auditioning for the inheritance. Logan drank 3 glasses of wine and started talking louder. He began bragging about a partnership he was about to sign. A deal that I knew for a fact did not exist because I had seen his bank statements last week when I paid his overdraft fee. I stopped listening to him. I focused on the movement of the staff. There was a woman, older, with a kind face, who was clearing the plates. She looked tired. When she came to my side, I instinctively stacked my side plate onto my dinner plate and moved my silverware to the proper position to make it easier for her to lift. "Thank you," I whispered to her. The sauce was delicious. The woman paused and gave me a genuine smile. "Thank you, Miss," she said softly. I looked up and caught Eleanor watching me. She was not looking at Logan, who was currently waving his fork in the air to emphasize a point about cryptocurrency. She was looking at my hands, which were resting quietly on the tablecloth. Her expression was unreadable, but for a second, the ice in her eyes seemed to thaw. After dinner, the men went to the library to smoke cigars, a tradition my father insisted on, even though he did not smoke and hated the smell. My mother pulled me aside in the hallway. Her grip on my arm was tight, her nails digging into my skin. "You are being too quiet," she hissed. "You are making us look bad. I am just eating dinner." "Mom," I said. "You look sullen," she said. "And listen to me, Valerie. Do not say a word about the money. Do not mention the loans. Do not mention the help you give us." "Why?" I asked. "Because she is old," Caroline said, her voice dropping to a frantic whisper. "Old people get confused. If she thinks we are struggling, she might get worried. She might think we are not capable of managing the estate. We have to show her we are strong. We have to show her we are successful. If she knows we need money, she might restrict things in the will, for our own good. You do not want that, do you?" I looked at my mother. She was terrified. She was not protecting Eleanor. She was protecting the illusion. She was protecting the future where she was rich and did not have to rely on her daughter anymore. I won't say anything. I said. Good, she said, smoothing her dress. You are a good girl. Just stay in the background. Let Logan handle the business talk. I needed air. I walked out through the French doors onto the stone terrace that overlooked the lake. The night was cold and crisp. The moon was reflecting off the black water, creating a path of silver light that looked like a road to nowhere. I wrapped my arms around myself, shivering slightly in my thin dress. It is cold tonight. I jumped. Eleanor was standing in the shadows of a stone pillar. She was wearing a wool shawl wrapped around her shoulders. She was holding a cigarette, the smoke curling up into the darkness. I had never seen her smoke before. I am sorry. Grandmother. I said, I did not mean to disturb you. You did not disturb me, she said. I came out here to escape the noise. Your brother has a very loud voice for a man who has remarkably little to say. I did not know how to respond to that, so I stayed silent. She walked over to the stone railing and looked out at the water. You stacked your plates, she said. I blinked. Pardon me. At dinner, she said. You stacked your plates for the maid, and you thanked her. Oh, I said. I used to wait tables in college. I know how heavy those trays can get. Eleanor turned to look at me. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of her face. Your father says you are a finance manager, she said, but you have the hands of someone who works. I looked at my hands. They were rougher than my mother's. I did not get manicures. I scrubbed my own floors. I like to be useful. I said, useful. She repeated the word as if tasting it. A dangerous thing to be in a family of ornamental people. She took a drag of her cigarette and exhaled a long plume of smoke. Do you know why I invited you all here? Valerie, she asked, to see the family I suggested. She made a sound that might have been a laugh. No, I invited you here because I am updating my will, and I needed to see something with my own eyes. My heart hammered in my chest. Was this it? Was she going to tell me that I was being cut out? She turned to face me fully. Her eyes were intense, searching. There are a lot of lies in that dining room. Valerie, she said, your father lies about his success. Your mother lies about her happiness. Your brother lies about everything. She paused. But you, she said, you are the only one who is not lying. You are just hiding. I felt a lump form in my throat. I am not hiding. Grandmother. She took a step closer to me. She smelled of cold air, tobacco, and expensive perfume. There are some people in this house who think that I do not know who keeps the house from burning down, she said softly. They think I am an old woman sitting in a tower, counting my gold, blind to the rot in the foundation. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream in the silence of the night. But I see the scorch marks on your hands, child. I stared at her. My breath hitched. She knew. She had to know. Before I could say anything, the glass door opened. My mother stuck her head out. Valerie. There you are, she called out, her voice shrill and fake. Come inside. Darling, we are taking a family photo in front of the fireplace. We need you to hold the camera. Eleanor stepped back. The moment was broken. The mask slid back into place. Go on, she said to me, flicking her cigarette ash over the railing. Go take their picture. I walked back inside. I took the camera. I took the photo of my parents and Logan standing in front of the fire, smiling like the kings and queens of the world. I was not in the frame. I was the one making sure they were in focus. We left the next morning. My father was euphoric. He was convinced he had charmed her. He was talking about buying a boat. Logan was hungover but confident, claiming that Grandma was definitely going to invest in his app. But I sat in the back seat, looking out at the red leaves passing by, and I could not shake the feeling of Eleanor's eyes on me. My mother turned to me as we hit the highway. See, she said, that went perfectly. She adores Logan, and you did good. Val, you stayed out of the way. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had told me to lie to protect her ego. She knows. Mom, I said quietly. Caroline laughed. waving her hand dismissively. She doesn't know anything. She is isolated. She is old. Don't think so much. Valerie, it causes wrinkles. I turned back to the window. My mother was wrong. Eleanor Kingsley was not confused, and she was not blind. That weekend wasn't a family reunion. It was an inspection. And as we drove away, leaving the iron gates behind us, I realized that while my family thought they had just secured their fortune, they had actually just walked into a trap. I just didn't know yet if I was caught in it with them, or if I was the bait. If the weekend at my grandmother's estate was a test, my family interpreted the lack of immediate failure as a winning lottery ticket. They returned to Willowcrest not with humility, but with a terrifying sense of entitlement. They seemed to believe that because Eleanor had not kicked us out, we were now pre-approved for her fortune. It was as if simply breathing the air in her foyer had elevated their credit rating. The spending started almost immediately. It was not subtle. My father, Mark, leased a new luxury SUV that cost more per month than my rent. He claimed he needed it to project the right image for the impending expansion of the family business, though there was no business and certainly no expansion. My mother, Caroline, began hosting dinner parties again, hiring caterers and buying cases of imported wine, waving away the costs with a flippant hand. We are investing in our network. She told me when I pointed out the stack of invoices on the counter, "You have to look successful to be successful." Valerie, Mother Kingsley would understand. But the centerpiece of this financial hallucination was Logan. 2 weeks after our return, Logan announced his new venture. He was pivoting from vintage clothes to technology, specifically real estate technology. He called it a proprietary algorithm for property valuation. In reality, it was a half-baked idea he had sketched on a napkin after watching 3 videos on the internet. But because it involved real estate, my parents were convinced it was destiny. It was the bridge that would connect Logan to Eleanor's empire. He needed capital. Of course he did. But this time, the ask was different. He did not just want cash. He wanted a line of credit. He wanted to incorporate. He wanted to look legitimate. They cornered me on a Tuesday evening. I had just come home from work, my eyes stinging from 10 hours of staring at spreadsheets. They were all sitting in my living room in my old apartment, the one I had before the house, waiting for me. "We need a favor, Val," Logan said. He was wearing a new suit. He looked sharp. He looked like a CEO. "We are opening a business line of credit," my father explained. "Just to get the ball rolling, we have a lender lined up. High tier, but because the company is new, they need a guarantor with a documented steady income history." I put my keys down on the table. I knew exactly where this was going. "No," I said, "I cannot co-sign a loan. Dad, I am already maxed out helping you with the house payments." Caroline stood up and walked over to me. She put her hands on my shoulders and began to massage the tension there. Her touch was familiar and terrifying because I knew it always came with a price tag. "Valerie, listen," she said softly. "This is not a loan. It is a revolving line of credit. We probably will not even use it. It is just for emergencies. It is a safety net. But we need your signature to open the account. You are the only one with the W-2 forms they like." I tried to pull away. "Mom, if you default on this, it ruins me. It destroys my credit. I work in finance. I can lose my license if I declare bankruptcy." Logan laughed. A short, incredulous sound. "Default, Val. Come on. We are talking about a few months. Once Grandma sees the prototype, she is going to back us. This is just bridge capital. Do you really think Grandma Eleanor is going to let her only grandson fail when he is following in her footsteps?" My father leaned forward, his face serious. "Valerie, think about the big picture. If we do not launch this now, someone else will. Do you want to be the reason your brother missed his chance? Do you want to explain to your grandmother why the family legacy died? Because you were too scared to sign a piece of paper, they hammered me for 3 hours. They alternated between promises of wealth and threats of failure. They used the word family like a bludgeon. Finally, worn down by exhaustion and the desperate need to make them stop talking, I signed. I signed my name as a co-guarantor on a business credit card with a limit of $50,000. I handed them the power to destroy me, and they took it with a smile. "Thanks, Val," Logan said, tucking the paperwork into his briefcase. "You won't regret this." I regretted it the next morning. I regretted it every single day that followed. The notifications started arriving on my phone a week later. $500 at a steakhouse, $2,000 at an electronics store, $300 for consulting fees that turned out to be charges at a nightclub. I called Logan. He didn't answer. I called my father. "It is networking," Valerie Mark shouted into the phone. "You have to wine and dine clients. Stop being such a micromanager. This is how business works." But they were not doing business. They were living a fantasy on credit, and my name was the collateral. I became a ghost. I stopped going out with my friends because I could not afford a $10 cocktail. When they invited me to birthday dinners or weekend trips, I lied. I told them I was busy with a big project at work. I told them I had a migraine. I told them anything to avoid the shame of admitting that I was 30 years old and had negative $12 in my checking account. I took on more freelance work. I started doing tax returns for strangers on the internet. I proofread legal documents at 3 a.m. I cut my own hair in the bathroom sink. I stopped buying coffee. I lived on peanut butter sandwiches. Every dollar I made went into the black hole of the family debt. Just this once became until next month, which became, "Don't you dare stop paying or we lose the house." Whenever I tried to draw a line, whenever I threatened to cut them off, my mother would pull out the ultimate weapon. She would call me in the middle of the day, her voice trembling. "I am worried about Logan," she would say. "He is under so much pressure. He was talking so darkly this morning. Valerie, he said he feels like a burden. He said maybe it would be better if he wasn't here." My blood would run cold. "You have to be gentle with him," she would whisper. "If you cut off the funding now, it will confirm his worst fears. He will spiral. You know how he gets. We cannot lose him. Val, I cannot survive that, and neither can you." It was a hostage situation. Logan's life was the hostage, and my bank account was the ransom. I never knew if the threat was real or if it was just another performance, but I was too terrified to call their bluff. So I paid. I paid to keep him alive. I paid to keep my mother from crying. I paid to keep the silence. During those long, dark months, my grandmother Eleanor began to call me. She never called the others, just me. Her calls were short, usually lasting less than 3 minutes. She never asked about the weather. She never asked about my love life. "Are you still at the office?" she would ask at 7 in the evening. "Yes, grandmother." "Are you being paid overtime?" "No, I am on salary." "I see." "And your freelance work? Are you setting aside 30% for taxes?" I froze. I had never told her about the freelance work. "How did you know about that?" I asked. "I make it my business to know who is working and who is playing," she said cryptically. "Tell me, Valerie, did you sign any documents recently? Any guarantees?" I hesitated. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to scream into the phone, "Yes, I signed my life away, help me." But the training was too deep. My mother's voice was in my head. "Don't worry her. Don't show weakness." "No, grandmother, I lied. Just standard paperwork." There was a silence on the other end of the line. It was a heavy, disappointed silence. "Be careful what you put your name on." "Valerie," she said sharply, "a name is the only thing you truly own. Once you lend it out, it comes back dirty." She would hang up, leaving me staring at my phone, my heart racing. I thought she was just being critical. I thought she was judging me. It never occurred to me that she was gathering evidence. It never occurred to me that she was building a file. One rainy Tuesday in November, I hit my breaking point. I received an alert that the business credit card, the one intended for the real estate algorithm, had been declined at a luxury resort in Mexico. Logan was on vacation. He was posting pictures of margaritas on social media while I was sitting in my cold apartment eating instant oatmeal for dinner. I sat down at my computer. My hands were shaking. I opened a spreadsheet. I had been avoiding this for years. I had been too scared to look at the total. But tonight, I needed to know. I went back 2 years. I pulled every bank statement. I pulled every credit card transaction. I pulled every Venmo transfer to my mother, every Western Union wire to my father, every emergency cash withdrawal. I entered the numbers into the columns. I added the interest fees I had paid on their behalf. I added the late penalties. When I hit the sum button, I stopped breathing. $142,380. 6 figures. I had poured nearly $150,000 into the void of my family's greed. That was a house. That was a retirement fund. That was a life. I sat back in my cheap office chair and stared at the screen. I felt sick. I felt like I had been physically beaten. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't a sister. I was an ATM machine with a pulse. They didn't love me. You don't destroy the people you love. You don't bleed them dry and then go to Mexico. A dark, terrifying thought entered my mind. It was a thought I had never allowed myself to think before. I wish they would go bankrupt. I sat there in the glow of the monitor and let the thought take root. If they lost the house, if Logan went to jail for fraud, if the cars were repossessed, I would be free. If there was nothing left to save, I would not have to save them. I realized then that I was waiting for a disaster to liberate me because I was too weak to liberate myself. I did not close the spreadsheet. Instead, I created a new folder on my desktop. I named it Taxes, a boring name that nobody would look at twice. I started downloading everything. I downloaded every email from my mother begging for money. I took screenshots of every text message from my father threatening guilt. I downloaded the loan documents where my signature sat next to Logan's. I downloaded the receipts from the nightclub and the resort in Mexico. I told myself I was just being organized. I told myself I might need it for tax purposes. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was building a bomb. I didn't know when I would detonate it, or if I ever would. But as I dragged file after file into that folder, I felt a tiny spark of something that felt like power. I was keeping the receipts. I remember looking at a photo of Logan on Instagram that night. He was tanned, smiling, holding a drink with a little umbrella in it. The caption read, "Living the dream. Blessed entrepreneur." I looked at his smile. I looked at the ocean behind him, and for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to protect him. I felt the urge to invoice him. I saved the photo to the folder. I did not know it then, but that folder would become the most valuable thing I owned. It was worth more than the house they would eventually leave me. It was worth more than the car my father drove. That folder was my emancipation proclamation, written in the language of bank transfers and broken promises. I closed my laptop. I went to bed. And for the first time in years, I didn't pray for them to be okay. I prayed for the truth to catch up with them. The call that changed everything came at 4 a.m. It was my mother, Caroline. Her voice was not hysterical with grief, but vibrating with a frantic, high-octane energy that I recognized immediately. It was the tone she used when a credit card was declined, or when a lie was about to be exposed. "Grandmother Eleanor has collapsed." She said, "It is her heart. We are at St. Jude's. Get here now, Valerie, and wear something professional. The lawyers are already here." That was the tell. The lawyers are already here. I drove to the hospital in the dark, my stomach churning. When I arrived, the scene was less like a family tragedy and more like a board meeting gone wrong. Eleanor was in a private suite, hooked up to machines that beeped in a steady, rhythmic cadence. She was unconscious, or at least, that is what we were told. The hallway outside her room was crowded. My father, Mark, was pacing back and forth, wearing a suit he must have thrown on in the dark. He was on the phone, whispering furiously to someone about liquid assets and timelines. My mother was sitting on a bench, reapplying her lipstick, checking her reflection in a compact mirror. Logan was slumped in a chair, looking pale and terrified, not because his grandmother was dying, but because he knew his safety net was lying in that bed. We did not go in to see her. We were not allowed. Instead, a man in a charcoal gray suit emerged from the room. He introduced himself as Mr. Sterling, Eleanor's personal attorney. He looked at us with eyes that were flat and unreadable. "Mrs. Nye Kingsley's condition is stable but critical," he said. "However, Per her strict instructions given prior to this event, in the case of incapacitation, we are to proceed with the immediate restructuring of the family trust. She wanted this handled while she was still with us. He paused, letting the weight of the implications settle. I have scheduled a preliminary reading of the asset distribution for 10 o'clock this morning at my firm, he said. Attendance is mandatory. The drive to the law firm was silent. My father drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. My mother stared out the window, a small, secret smile playing on her lips. They were not mourning, they were calculating. I sat in the back, closing my eyes. All I could think about was the spreadsheet on my computer. $142,000. If I inherited just enough to cover that, just enough to wipe the slate clean, I would be happy. I did not want the empire. I did not want the lake house. I just wanted to be at zero. I wanted to wake up in the morning and own my own breath. The conference room at Sterling Associates was designed to intimidate. The table was a slab of mahogany that looked like it stretched for a mile. The view from the floor-to-ceiling windows showed the entire city of Willowcrest, small and insignificant below us. We took our seats. Mark and Caroline sat at the head of the table. Closest to the lawyer, they sat tall, projecting authority. Logan sat next to them, fidgeting with his watch. I sat at the far end, alone. Mr. Sterling opened a thick leather binder. He adjusted his glasses. As you know, Eleanor Kingsley has built a substantial portfolio over her lifetime. He began, the purpose of this restructuring is to ensure the continuity of the family legacy. She has made specific allocations based on the aptitudes and needs of each family member. My father nodded vigorously. Aptitudes. Yes, precisely. Mr. Sterling began to read. To my daughter, Caroline, and her husband, Mark. I transfer the majority voting shares of the Kingsley Real Estate Group, along with the title to the Lakeside Estate and the primary investment portfolio held at Chase Bank. My mother let out a gasp. She grabbed my father's hand. Mark closed his eyes and exhaled, his face relaxing into a mask of pure triumph. They had done it. They had secured the bag. They were rich. Not pretend rich, not credit card rich. Real, generational wealth rich. To my grandson, Logan. Mr. Sterling continued. Logan sat up straight. I established the Kingsley Venture Capital Fund, endowed with $10 million, to be used exclusively for the development of new business projects, subject to quarterly review. Logan looked like he had been struck by lightning. $10 million. He looked at me, his eyes wide and wild. Did you hear that? Val, he whispered across the table. 10 million. He was already spending it in his head. I could see it. He was buying the boat. He was buying the loft in the city. He was buying the respect he had never earned. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. The room went silent. It was my turn. And to my granddaughter, Valerie, I held my breath. My hands were clenched in my lap so hard my knuckles were white. Please, just let it be cash. Just let it be enough to pay off the loans. I transfer the title of the property located at 42 Maple Street. Willowcrest. I froze. Maple Street. I knew that street. It was in the old district, the part of town where the factories used to be. It was not a wealthy neighborhood. It was a place where people struggled to pay rent. Mr. Sterling continued. Additionally, I leave to her the oil painting titled The Gray Storm, which currently hangs in the upstairs hallway of the estate, and a locked portfolio of municipal bonds which will mature in 30 years. He closed the binder. That was it. I sat there, waiting for the rest, waiting for the cash sum, waiting for the debt relief, waiting for the apology, but there was nothing else. My parents turned to look at me. I expected them to be outraged on my behalf. I expected my mother to ask if there was a mistake. I expected my father to demand equality. Instead, my father smiled. Well, look at that. Valerie, he said, his voice booming with false cheer. You got a house. A whole house. Free and clear. That is fantastic. I stared at him. Dad, that house is... I have driven past it. It is falling apart. It is worth maybe $80,000. It is equity, he insisted. Do you know how hard it is to get on the property ladder these days? You should be grateful. Your grandmother gave you a home. My mother chimed in, her voice dripping with that sickening sweetness she used when she was trying to manipulate reality. Valerie, you have to understand the logic here. She said, you are so independent. You have your job. You have your career. You have never needed help. But Logan has a big vision. He needs capital to build the future. And we have the burden of managing the entire company now. It makes sense. It makes sense. The words echoed in my head. It made sense to them that the person who had carried them for a decade got a shack, and the person who had drained them dry got $10 million. Logan looked at me. For a split second, I saw shame in his face. He knew. He knew exactly how much money I had given him. He knew I was drowning in debt because of him. He looked down at the mahogany table, unable to meet my eyes. But then, the shame vanished, replaced by the intoxication of his new reality. I can hire you, Val, he said, a grin spreading across his face. I am going to need a bookkeeper for the fund. I can put you on payroll. He said it like he was doing me a favor, like he was tossing a coin to a beggar. I felt something break inside me. It was a quiet snap, like a dry twig stepping on in a forest. I looked at the lawyer, Mr. Sterling. He was watching me. His expression was not one of pity. It was intense, calculating. He looked like he was waiting for me to flip the table. He looked like he was waiting for me to scream. There was something in his eyes, a glimmer of something that wasn't quite professional detachment. It looked almost like expectation. But I didn't scream. I couldn't. The betrayal was too absolute. It was so heavy it pinned me to the chair. So, that is it, I asked, my voice sounding hollow. I get a derelict house and a painting, and they get the empire. The lawyer nodded slowly. That is the current disposition of the assets. Ms. Ross, my father stood up, clapping his hands together. Well, I think this calls for a celebration. Champagne, perhaps? Or are we going straight to the estate to survey the grounds? He was already moving on. He had stepped over my corpse and was walking toward the exit. You coming? Val Logan asked. Gathering his things. We are going to celebrate. I looked at them. My family. The people I had starved for. No, I said. I have to go back to work. Caroline tutted, shaking her head. Always working. You really need to learn to enjoy life. Valerie, maybe now that you have a house, you can relax a little. She adjusted her silk scarf, picked up her purse, and walked out of the room without looking back. Mark followed her, already on his phone, barking orders to some imaginary assistant. Logan lingered for a second, gave me a thumbs up, and trotted after them. I was left alone in the conference room with Mr. Sterling. He stood up and walked over to me. He handed me a heavy envelope. The deed to the property, he said, and the keys. I took the envelope. It felt light. It felt worthless. Mr. Sterling, I said, Did she say anything else about me? He looked down at me. He paused for a long time. She said that you are the only one who knows the value of $1, he said, and that is why you are the only one who will know what to do with this. I didn't understand what he meant. It sounded like a riddle. It sounded like a cruel joke. I stood up. My legs felt numb. I walked out of the glass office, down the plush hallway, and into the elevator. When the doors closed, I leaned my head against the cold metal wall. I laughed. It was a wet, jagged sound that hurt my throat. I had been waiting for my inheritance to pay me back for the life they had stolen. But they hadn't just stolen my past. They had stolen my future, too. They had looked at my sacrifice and decided it wasn't worth a reward. They decided it was just my function. I was the mule, and you don't leave the estate to the mule. You leave it to the show ponies. I walked out of the building and into the bright, harsh sunlight of the parking lot. I looked at my car, a 10-year-old sedan with a dent in the bumper. I realized then that the debt would never be repaid. The money was gone. The years were gone. I got into my car and threw the envelope onto the passenger seat. So be it. I whispered to the empty car. If I was just an employee to them, then I quit. And if they thought this was the end of the transaction, they were wrong. Because employees have one thing that family members do not. Employees have receipts. I started the engine. I didn't go back to work. I drove to Maple Street. I drove to the crumbling house that was now the only thing I owned in the world. I needed to see my severance package. And as I drove, the tears finally stopped. They were replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They thought they had won. They thought they had walked away with everything. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had left me with nothing to lose. And there is no one more dangerous on earth than a woman who has already lost everything she cared about. The invitation called it a celebration of life for Eleanor Kingsley. It was ostensibly a memorial gathering, a solemn occasion to honor the matriarch who was still lying in a hospital bed in a coma, technically alive but legally effectively gone. But as I pulled my car up to my parents' driveway, it was immediately clear that this was not a memorial. It was a victory lap. The house, which I had paid the mortgage on for 6 separate months over the last 3 years, was glowing. Every light was on. There were lanterns lining the walkway. There was a new landscaping crew working on the hedges just yesterday, I knew, because I saw the invoice on the counter when I dropped off the groceries. Though for the first time, I had not paid it. I was not dressed for a party. I was wearing my work clothes, a sensible gray skirt and a blouse that had seen better days. I was not asked to come early to socialize. I was asked to come early to set up. Valerie, thank goodness you are here, my mother, Caroline, said as she opened the door. She was wearing a black dress that was definitely new, silk and cut low in the back. She held a glass of champagne in one hand. The caterers are running late with the appetizers. Can you go into the kitchen and arrange the cheese platters and check the ice situation? We cannot run out of ice like last time. She did not ask how I was. She did not ask about the reading of the will 2 days ago. She did not ask about the crumbling house on Maple Street that I was now spending my nights in. Freezing because the furnace was broken, I walked into the kitchen. It was a mess of expensive ingredients and chaos. I put down my purse, the strap was fraying, and started to work. I arranged the brie and the grapes. I filled the ice buckets. I carried the heavy trays out to the dining room where the guests were starting to assemble. The guests were a mix of family members we rarely saw, and a few of my father's friends who were always around when there was free alcohol. They were all talking about one thing: the future. I moved through the crowd like a ghost. I offered napkins. I took empty glasses. I was the invisible machinery of the party, just as I had been the invisible machinery of the family finances for a decade. Dinner was a seated affair. The table had been extended to seat 20 people. Mark sat at the head, looking flushed and expansive. Caroline sat opposite him. Logan was in the middle, the guest of honor in all but name. I was seated at the very end of the table, next to a cousin I hadn't seen since I was 12, near the swinging door to the kitchen so I could get up and clear the plates. The conversation was a steady stream of self-congratulation. My father was holding court, telling a story about how he had always known Eleanor's vision for the company would eventually pass to him. "It is a heavy responsibility," Mark said, swirling his red wine, "but someone has to carry the torch." Mother knew that Caroline and I were the only ones with the experience to manage the portfolio. "It is a burden, really, but we accept it for the family. A burden." I cut into my chicken. The knife scraped against the porcelain. I remembered the burden of transferring my entire savings account to him so he wouldn't lose his car. I remembered the burden of eating ramen noodles for a month so he could pay his club dues. "And Logan," my mother chimed in, her eyes shining, "tell everyone about the venture fund." Logan sat up straighter. He loosened his tie. "Well, it is early stages," he said, affecting a tone of bored expertise, "but with the $10 million in seed capital, I am looking at acquiring some distress assets in the tech sector. The market is ripe for a disruptor. I have a meeting with some developers next week. We are going to build an empire." The table murmured with approval. Someone toasted him. To the future, they shouted. I chewed my food. It tasted like ash. No one asked me what I was going to do with my inheritance. No one asked if I had fixed the hole in the roof of the Maple Street house. I was not part of the future. I was a relic of the past, the embarrassing reminder of the lean years. Then, Aunt Josephine spoke up. She was Mark's younger sister, the only person in the family who didn't seem to care about money, mostly because she lived simply and stayed out of the drama. She looked down the table at me. "But what about Valerie?" she asked. Her voice cut through the noise. The table went quiet. My father looked annoyed at the interruption. "What about her?" Mark asked. "Well," Josephine continued, looking from Mark to Caroline, "I just recall that Valerie was the one helping you out quite a bit these last few years. I remember you telling me she covered the property taxes last winter. And didn't she handle Logan's tuition debts? It seems like she should be part of this empire building too." I stopped eating. I looked up. For the first time, someone had said it out loud. My mother let out a light, tinkling laugh. It was a sound designed to diffuse tension, but to me, it sounded like glass breaking. "Oh, Josephine, you know how Valerie is," Caroline said. She smiled at me, a smile that did not reach her eyes. "She likes to help. It is her nature. She is very maternal that way. She insisted on doing those things. It was her choice. She derives a lot of satisfaction from being the martyr." I stared at her. A martyr. I had not chosen it. I had been begged. I had been manipulated. I had been threatened with their ruin if I didn't comply. "She makes it sound so dramatic," Mark added, waving his hand dismissively. "We never forced her to do anything. Valerie is just risk-averse. She likes stability. She likes fixing small problems. That is why the house Mother left her is perfect for her. It is a project. It gives her something to do with her hands." The guests chuckled. A few of them glanced at me with pity. Poor Valerie. The little helper. The one with the small life. I felt a heat rising in my chest. It was not the flush of embarrassment this time. It was the cold, white fire of absolute clarity. They were not just stealing my money. They were stealing my narrative. They were rewriting history to make themselves look like benevolent parents, and me look like a pathetic volunteer who enjoyed cleaning up their messes. Mark raised his glass again. He looked down the long table, past the candles, past the flowers, directly at me. His eyes were glassy with wine and arrogance. "Honestly, Val," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "you look so serious down there. Cheer up. You know, in a way, you do not even really need to be here tonight." The room went dead silent. "What do you mean?" Aunt Josephine asked sharply. "I mean," my father said, shrugging, "the hard part is over. The struggle is done. We have the resources now. The family is secure. So, your job is done. Valerie, you can rest. You do not need to worry about us anymore. The people who are meant to lead are finally in charge." It was a joke. He meant it as a joke. He smiled to show it was a joke. But it was the truest thing he had ever said. You do not need to be here. My utility had expired. The bridge had been crossed, and now they were burning it because they liked the fire. Caroline leaned over and patted Mark's arm, but she looked at me. "Your father is teasing," she said, but she had a sharp edge to her voice. "But really, Valerie, nobody feels comfortable around someone who is always grim. We are celebrating. Nobody wants to be reminded of budgets and responsibilities tonight." It is such a buzzkill. I looked at Logan, my brother, the boy I had protected from bullies, the boy whose credit score I had saved, the boy who was currently sitting on $10 million while I sat on a rickety chair. He looked down at his wine glass. He swirled the red liquid. He did not look at me. He did not say, "That is not fair." "Dad," he did not say, "Valerie saved us." He stayed silent. His silence was a transaction. He was trading his integrity for his inheritance. I looked at them, all of them, and for the first time in my life, I did not see my family. I saw a group of parasites who had finally found a bigger host. I placed my fork down on the plate. It made a soft clink. I picked up my linen napkin. I folded it in half. Then I folded it again. I smoothed the crease with my thumb. I pushed my chair back. The scraping sound against the hardwood floor was loud, harsh. I stood up. "Valerie," my mother said, her voice tight, Where are you going? We haven't had dessert yet. I did not look at her. I looked at the room. I looked at the expensive curtains. I looked at the crystal chandelier. I looked at the faces of the people who had consumed my 20s. I am not hungry. I said. My voice was calm. It was steady. It did not shake. Mark laughed nervously. Oh, come on, Val. Don't be dramatic. Sit down. I looked at him. You said my job is done. Dad, I said, you are right. I picked up my purse from the floor. You have the money now. I said, you have the empire. You have the future. So you do not need the backup plan anymore. I turned to go. Valerie Caroline snapped. Sit down this instant. You are embarrassing us. I stopped at the doorway. I turned back one last time. I am not embarrassing you. Mother, I said, I am freeing you. You said nobody likes to be around someone who talks about responsibility. Well, good news. You will never have to hear me talk about it again. I looked at Logan. Good luck with the empire, I said. Then I delivered the line that would mark the end of my life as their daughter and the beginning of my life as a stranger. Consider this my resignation. From tonight, I will not bother the family anymore. I walked out of the dining room. I walked through the kitchen where the caterers were plating the tiramisu. I walked out the front door, past the manicured hedges, and into the cool night air. Behind me, inside the house, there was a moment of silence. Then, I heard my father's booming laugh. She will be back, I heard him shout. She just needs to cool off. She needs us. The laughter resumed. They went back to their wine. They went back to their celebration. They thought it was just a tantrum. They thought I would be back on Tuesday to pay the bills they forgot about. I got into my car. I started the engine. I drove away from the house with the lanterns. I drove toward the dark, quiet side of town where my crumbling inheritance waited for me. But as I drove, a strange sensation washed over me. I wasn't sad. I wasn't scared. I was light. I felt the weight of 3 adult humans lift off my shoulders. My father asked if I wanted to be the reason the family failed. He didn't realize that by walking away, I wasn't causing the failure. I was just removing the only thing that had been preventing it. I gripped the steering wheel. If I stop paying, I thought, if I stop fixing, if I stop answering the phone, can they actually stand? They thought the money from Eleanor made them invincible. They didn't understand that money is just fuel. If you put fuel in a car with a broken engine, it doesn't go faster. It just explodes. I turned onto Maple Street. The streetlights were flickering. My house was dark. I pulled into the driveway. Let them have their party, I whispered. Let them have the champagne. Because tomorrow, the bills come due. And for the first time in 32 years, I am not going to be the one to pay them. The morning after I walked out of the celebration party, I did not wake up with a hangover. I woke up with a clarity that felt sharp enough to cut glass. I sat down at my small, wobbly kitchen table in the Maple Street house, opened my laptop, and began the systematic demolition of the financial architecture I had spent a decade building for other people. It was not emotional. It was administrative. I logged into the utility accounts for my parents' home. I removed my credit card from the auto-pay settings. I logged into the streaming services, the grocery delivery apps, the pharmacy accounts. Delete, delete, delete. Then came the harder part. I drafted a formal letter to the bank manager at the local branch where my father did his business. I wrote clearly and without adverbs. I stated that effective immediately, any verbal guarantees or implied co-signatory status attributed to Valerie Ross for the debts of Mark or Logan Kingsley were null and void. I stated that I had resigned from my position as the family safety net. I printed it, signed it, and mailed it certified delivery. For the next week, I threw myself into the house. This place, this crumbling inheritance that my family had laughed at, became my sanctuary. It was in bad shape. The roof leaked in the hallway. The wallpaper in the bedroom was peeling in long, sunburned strips. The pipes rattled like they were possessed. But every time I hammered a nail, I knew I was fixing my own wall. Every time I scrubbed a floor, I was cleaning my own dirt. It was exhausting. Physical labor that left my muscles screaming at night. But for the first time in my life, the fatigue felt clean. I was not tired from carrying someone else. I was tired from building something for myself. I slept on a mattress on the floor because I could not afford a bed frame yet. I ate sandwiches standing up in the kitchen, and in the silence of that drafty house, I began to hear my own thoughts again. 3 weeks passed. I had not spoken to a single member of my family. Then, the phone rang. It was 6:30 in the morning. The sky outside was a bruised purple, the sun not quite up. I looked at the screen. It was an unknown number. I answered, expecting a telemarketer. "Ms. Ross," a male voice asked. It was tight, professional, and urgent. "Speaking." I said, "This is Jonathan Eames from the Risk Management Department at Sovereign Capital. I am calling regarding the outstanding margin call on the Kingsley Venture portfolio. We have been trying to reach Mr. Logan Kingsley and your father, Mark Ross, for 48 hours without success. As you are listed as a secondary contact on the initial inquiry forms, we are notifying you that the account is in critical default." I sat up on my mattress, pulling the blanket around my shoulders. "I am sorry," I said calmly. "You must have the wrong information. I am not a holder of that account." The man sighed. The sound of someone who had made this call 1,000 times. "Ms. Ross." The account was leveraged against the anticipated assets of the Kingsley Trust. Your brother executed several high-risk options trades that have moved unfavorably. The bank is preparing to seize the collateral assets to cover the liquidity gap. We need an immediate transfer of $200,000 to halt the proceedings. $200,000. I let the number hang in the cold morning air. It was a staggering amount. It was more money than I made in 3 years. And Logan had lost it in 3 weeks. He must have started spending the moment the will was read. He must have borrowed against money he did not even have yet, convinced he was a genius who could not lose. "Ms. Ross," the man asked, "are you there? We need to know how the family intends to proceed." I took a breath. I looked at the cracked paint on my bedroom wall. "I think there is a misunderstanding." "Mr. Eames," I said. "What misunderstanding?" he asked. "You said you are calling the family." I said, "But I do not recognize the people you are talking about. The people who opened that account made it very clear that I'm not part of their financial future." "But Ms. Ross," he started. "I suggest you call them again," I said, "and if they do not answer, I suggest you do what banks do. Take the collateral. I do not think you understand the gravity." He tried to bluster. "I understand perfectly." I said, "I understand that for the first time in 10 years. This is not my problem." I hung up. I stared at the phone. My hand was not shaking. I waited for the guilt to hit me. I waited for the old panic, the instinct to drain my savings, to take out a loan, to fix it. It did not come. Instead, I felt a strange, hollow peace. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up again. It was my mother. I let it ring. It rang again. Then my father. Then Logan. I got up and made coffee. I showered. I put on my work clothes. When I finally checked my phone an hour later, there were 14 missed calls and a string of voicemails. I listened to one from my mother. "Valerie, pick up the phone. The bank is threatening to freeze the house accounts. Logan is a mess. He is saying it is a market correction. But they are talking about seizing the cars. You have to call them. You speak their language. Tell them it is a mistake. We need a bridge loan. Just for a month. You have to help us. We are your family." Her voice was high, shrill, bordering on hysteria. There was no hello. There was no, "How are you?" Just a demand. Just the assumption that I was still the employee who had walked out of the shift but could be called back in for an emergency. I typed a text message. I added my mother, my father, and Logan to the group chat. I wrote, "I was told at the party that my job was done. I was told that the people meant to lead were finally in charge. I am respecting your wishes. From now on, every adult in this family is responsible for their own financial decisions. Do not call me about money again." I hit send. Then I blocked their numbers for the next 24 hours. I went to work. By the end of the week, the news had leaked out of the tight circle of our family and into the wider network of relatives in Willowcrest. Small towns talk, and creditors talk louder. The story was that Logan had tried to play Wall Street tycoon. He had used the promise of his $10 million trust fund, which he did not technically have control over yet, to secure high-interest loans from predatory lenders. He had dumped the money into volatile cryptocurrency schemes and speculative real estate futures that had collapsed overnight. Mark and Caroline had co-signed everything. They had bet the farm on their golden boy, believing that the money from Grandma Eleanor was a bottomless well that would refill whatever cup Logan drained. Now, the well was dry, and the thirsty were panicking. On Saturday afternoon, a gray sedan pulled up to my curb. It was not a luxury car. It was a practical, 5-year-old Toyota. I watched from the window as my Aunt Josephine got out. She walked up the path, stepping carefully over the cracked paving stones I hadn't fixed yet. She was carrying a plastic container. I opened the door. "Hello, Valerie," she said. "Hello, Aunt Jo." I said. I invited her in. She looked around the small living room. It was sparse. I had a second-hand sofa I had cleaned, a rug I had bought on sale, and the painting Grandma had left me hanging above the fireplace, a stormy seascape in a heavy gold frame. "It is a good house," Aunt Jo said, nodding. "It has good bones. It just needed someone to care about it." She sat down on the sofa. She placed the container on the coffee table. "Oatmeal raisin cookies," she said. "I know you do not eat sugar during the week, but it is Saturday." "Thank you," I said. I sat in the armchair opposite her. I braced myself. I expected her to be the emissary. I expected her to tell me that I was being cruel, that blood was thicker than water, that I should be the bigger person and save them one last time. "How are they?" I asked, because I knew she was waiting for me to ask. "It is a circus over there," she said bluntly. She opened the container and offered me a cookie. "Your father is drinking too much," she said. "He is shouting at everyone. He is blaming the banks. He is blaming the government. Mostly, he is blaming you." "Me?" I asked. "Of course," she said. "He says you abandoned ship. He says you knew this would happen and you didn't warn them. He says a good daughter would have stopped her brother from making mistakes." I laughed bitterly. "I tried," I said. "I tried for 10 years. "I know," she said. "And Caroline?" I asked. "Your mother is playing the victim," Jo said. "She is calling everyone in the phone book, crying about how hard it is to be a mother, how ungrateful children are these days. She told Cousin Sarah that you are punishing them because you are jealous of Logan's inheritance." "Jealous," I repeated. I looked at the cracked ceiling. "I am not jealous. I am relieved. Logan is the worst of them," Jo continued. "He is not even taking responsibility. He keeps saying the market was rigged. He says he just needs more capital to double down and win it back. He's like a gambler at a slot machine who thinks the next pull is the jackpot." She took a bite of her cookie. "They are going to lose the cars," she said. "Maybe the house too, if they leverage the equity like I think they did." I felt a twinge of pain in my chest. It was the old reflex. The house I grew up in, the house where I learned to walk. I started. "No," Jo said. Her voice was sharp. I looked at her. "You should do absolutely nothing, Valerie," she said. She leaned forward, her eyes serious. "You spent your whole life being the crutch," she said. "If you go back there now, you are not saving them. You are just crippling them further. They have never had to face a consequence in their lives because you were always there to pay the bill, but they are going to drown." I said. "Then let them learn to swim," she said. "Or let them sink. But you cannot keep setting yourself on fire to keep them warm." We sat in silence for a moment. The house creaked in the wind. Then, Aunt Jo looked at me with a strange expression. "There is something else you need to know," she said. "What I asked, about your grandmother." She said. I looked at the painting on the wall. "Is she okay? Is she still?" "She is not in the hospital," Jo said. I blinked. "What? She was discharged 4 days ago," Jo said. "She went back to the estate. She is sitting in her library right now, drinking tea and reading the paper. But," I stammered, "but Mom said she was in a coma." "The lawyer said she was incapacitated. She had a mild arrhythmia." Joe said. It was serious, but not that serious. She woke up the next day. Then why? Why did we have the reading of the will? Why did the lawyer restructure the trust? Joe smiled. It was a small, secretive smile. Because she asked him to. Joe said. I stared at my aunt. The pieces started to click together. But the picture they formed was impossible. Are you saying... I started. Are you saying she staged it? I am saying she wanted to see what would happen if she took her hand off the wheel. Joe said. She wanted to see what Mark and Caroline would do if they thought they finally had the power. She wanted to see what Logan would do with a promise of millions. And she wanted to see what you would do when you were given nothing. My mouth fell open. She knows, I whispered. She knows about the party. She knows about the loans, Joe nodded. She knows everything. Valerie. She has known for a long time. But there is a difference between knowing something and seeing it proved. She wanted to see their true faces, and she wanted to see if you had the strength to walk away. I felt a chill run down my spine. It was terrifying. It was brilliant. It was exactly what a woman who built an empire would do. So she is watching them fall apart, I asked. She is watching. Joe confirmed. She gets daily reports from the bank. She knows about the margin call. She knows about the panic. Why doesn't she stop it, I asked. She could fix this with a signature. Joe looked at me, and her eyes were sad but firm. Because sometimes, Valerie, the only way to cure a sickness is to let the fever burn it out. Mark and Caroline and Logan, they are sick with greed. They are sick with entitlement. If she saves them now, they will never change. She reached out and patted my knee. She is waiting, Joe said. Waiting for what? Waiting to see who survives the fire. Joe said. She stood up. She smoothed her skirt. I have to go, she said. I promised to help Sarah with her garden. I stood up and walked her to the door. My head was spinning. My grandmother was not a helpless invalid. She was the grandmaster of a chess game I hadn't even realized was being played. Aunt Jo stopped on the porch. She looked at the peeling paint on my railing. You fix this up, she said. Make it yours. I will, I said. And Valerie, she said, turning back. Yes, do not feel guilty about the silence. She said, silence is the sound of you healing. She walked down the path and got into her Toyota. I watched her drive away. I stood on the porch for a long time. I looked at the sky. Somewhere, miles away, my parents were screaming at bankers. Somewhere, my brother was watching his fantasy dissolve. And somewhere, in a stone mansion by a lake, an old woman was sitting in a wingback chair, watching it all happen, waiting to see if her granddaughter would finally stand up. I went back inside. I locked the door. I looked at the painting of the storm. I picked up my phone. I checked the blocked list. I saw the notifications of blocked calls ticking up. 17, 18, 19. I did not unblock them. I went to the kitchen, picked up a scraper, and went back to the hallway. There was a layer of old wallpaper that needed to come down. Let them burn. I thought, I had work to do. The question hung in the damp air of my living room, heavy and suffocating. So this is what they left you. I looked at my grandmother, Eleanor Kingsley. She stood in the center of the room, a monolith in a cashmere coat, looking entirely out of place against the peeling wallpaper and the water-stained ceiling. Her question was not rhetorical. She demanded an answer. Yes, I said, my voice tight. This is it. Eleanor nodded slowly. She did not look horrified. She looked like a building inspector assessing a structure for demolition. Show me the rest, she said. I hesitated. Grandmother, it is a mess. The floor in the hallway is rotted through. The furnace does not work. It is barely habitable. Show me, she repeated. I led her through the house. It was a tour of my humiliation. I showed her the kitchen where the cabinets were hanging off the hinges. I showed her the bathroom where the tub was stained with rust that no amount of scrubbing could remove. I showed her the bedroom, where I slept on a mattress on the floor because I could not afford a bed frame after paying the deposit to turn the electricity on. We stopped in the hallway. There was a bucket on the floor, catching a steady drip of water from the roof. Above it, I had used duct tape to hold a piece of plastic sheeting over the crack in the plaster. It was a pathetic, desperate attempt to keep the house from dissolving. Eleanor looked at the bucket. She listened to the rhythmic plink, plink, plink of the water. She turned to me. Her face was unreadable. "You worked for 10 years," she said. "You had a good job. You were smart, and this is where you sleep." I felt the anger rise up in my throat, hot and acidic. I had spent weeks trying to be stoic, trying to be the bigger person. But standing here, under her judgment, I cracked. I did not choose this. "Grandmother," I said, my voice shaking, "I did not spend my money on vacations. I did not spend it on clothes. I spent it on them. I spent it keeping Dad out of court. I spent it keeping Mom's credit score from hitting 0. I spent it keeping Logan out of trouble. This house is what I have because I gave them everything else. I expected her to lecture me. I expected her to tell me I was a fool for letting them use me. Instead, she reached into her handbag. It was a small, structured leather bag that probably cost more than the entire contents of my home. She pulled out a thin file folder. "I know," she said. She handed me the folder. I opened it. My heart stopped. Inside were printouts, dozens of them. I recognized them immediately. They were my spreadsheets. They were the copies of the wire transfers. They were the screenshots of the text messages from my mother begging for money. They were the emails from the bank confirming the loans I had co-signed. It was the contents of the secret folder I had kept on my laptop, the receipts I had been saving for a rainy day. I stared at her, my hands trembling. "How did you get this?" I whispered. "This is on my computer. It is password protected." "Your Aunt Josephine," Eleanor said calmly. "Aunt Jo, you asked her to look over a rental agreement for you 3 months ago." Eleanor said, "You gave her your laptop password. She saw the folder. She opened it, and when she saw what was inside, she called me." I felt a wave of dizziness. Aunt Jo had been reporting to her. "She did not steal it," Eleanor continued. "She protected it. She printed everything and brought it to me because she was afraid you would delete it. She was afraid you would convince yourself that it wasn't that bad. She wanted to make sure there was a record." She walked over to the dusty armchair I had dragged in from the curb and sat down. She did not even check it for dirt. She sat with the posture of a queen on a throne. "I have read every line. Valerie," she said, "I know about the tuition. I know about the car payments. I know about the business loan you signed for Logan, $142,000. She said the number with a clinical precision. I looked down at the papers in my hand. The evidence of my exploitation. "I thought you were in a coma." I said, "A convenient fiction." She replied, "I had a heart episode." "Yes, but I was awake 24 hours later. When I saw the vultures circling the hospital bed, I decided to stay asleep a little longer. I wanted to see what they would do if they thought the referee had left the field." She gestured to the folder. "The one Mr. Sterling read to you. That was a test. Valerie, it was a mask." I stared at her. "A test I needed to know who they really were." She said, "I knew they were greedy, but I needed to know if they were irredeemable. I needed to know if, given absolute power and security, they would finally treat you with decency. I wanted to see if Mark would pay you back. I wanted to see if Caroline would ensure you were taken care of. I wanted to see if Logan would share his windfall." She paused, her eyes hardening. "They failed. Spectacularly. I remembered the party. I remembered my father's laugh. You do not need to be here. They did not just take the money," Eleanor said. "They erased you. They took your sacrifice and called it their success. And then they handed you a ruin and told you to be grateful." She looked around the room again. "They showed me exactly who they are," she said, "and in doing so, they showed me who you are." "Me?" I asked. "I am the one who let them do it. I am the weak one." "No," she said sharply. "You are the only one who survived them." She leaned forward. "Do you know why I built my trust the way I did?" she asked. "Years ago, I moved the bulk of the family assets, the real assets, not the table scraps I left in that dummy will, into a blind trust. It has a very specific set of criteria for the beneficiary. She counted them off on her gloved fingers. 1. The beneficiary must have a documented history of financial competence. 2. The beneficiary must demonstrate the ability to survive without family assistance. And 3. The beneficiary must prove they can set boundaries with the other members of the family to protect the asset. She looked at me pointedly. For years, you failed the third condition. Valerie, you were competent. Yes. You were hardworking. Yes. But you were a doormat. You kept giving them money, as long as you were enabling them. I could not trust you with the estate. You would have just handed it over to them. I felt a flush of shame. She was right. But then came the party. She said, Aunt Jo told me what you did. She told me you stood up. She told me you walked out. She told me you cut them off. She smiled. A rare, genuine smile. That was the moment you qualified. I looked at the folder. I looked at the house. So, what happens now? I asked. Now, Eleanor said. We take the mask off. She stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at my overgrown yard. Mark and Caroline think they own the company, she said. They do not. They own a shell corporation that holds the voting rights to a subsidiary that is currently carrying $3 million in debt. They think they are rich. In reality, they are legally responsible for a sinking ship. She turned back to me. And Logan, he thinks he has a $10 million venture fund. He does not. He has a line of credit that is secured by assets that I can freeze with a single phone call, which, incidentally, I did this morning. My eyes widened. That explained the panic. That explained the calls from the bank. You froze it, I asked. I liquidated it, she corrected. The money is gone. The debts, however, remain. And because Logan signed those loan agreements as a primary borrower, and your parents co-signed as guarantors, they are currently exposed to a level of financial ruin that they cannot even comprehend. She walked back to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. It was heavy and warm. Valerie, she said, I am an old woman. I do not have the energy to fight them in court. I do not have the patience to audit their mess. She reached into her bag again and pulled out a thick leather-bound document. This is the transfer of authority for the blind trust, she said. If you sign this, you become the sole executor of the Kingsley estate. You control the real estate. You control the investments. You control the liquidity. She paused. And you control the debt. I looked at the document. It was terrifying. It was power. Pure, undiluted power. If you sign this, she said, you have the authority to force the sale of your parents' house to cover their liabilities. You have the authority to declare Logan bankrupt. You have the authority to strip them of every illusion they have left. I pulled back. Grandmother, I said, I cannot destroy them. They are my parents. I am not asking you to destroy them, Eleanor said firmly. I am asking you to let them face the consequences of their own actions. She took the folder of receipts from my hand and held it up. Look at this. Valerie, did you destroy them when you paid their bills? No, you saved them. And what did they do? They asked for more. They mocked you. They discarded you. She threw the folder onto the wobbly table. It landed with a heavy slap. They are like children playing with matches, she said. If you keep putting out the fires, they will never learn that fire burns. I am asking you to let them feel the heat, not for revenge, but because it is the only way they will ever stop. I looked at the document. I thought about the phone calls I had ignored this morning. I thought about Logan's face when he bragged about his empire. I thought about my mother telling me I was a buzzkill for talking about responsibility. If I do this, I said quietly, they will hate me. They already resent you. Eleanor said, they resent you because you remind them of their own incompetence. At least if you hold the pen, you can ensure they do not starve. You can ensure they have a roof over their heads. It just won't be a mansion, and it won't be paid for by you. She pulled a gold pen from her pocket and held it out to me. You have a choice. Valerie, she said, you can stay in this house, fixing the leaks with duct tape, and let them drag the family name into the mud. Or you can take the pen, and you can set the world right. I looked at the pen. It caught the light from the single, bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. I looked around my kitchen. I saw the years of my life peeling off the walls like the paint. I saw the girl who ate instant noodles so her brother could have a guitar. I saw the woman who worked 80 hours a week so her father could drive a luxury car. I was done being that woman. I reached out and took the pen. It felt cool and solid in my hand. I am not doing this for revenge, I said, my voice steady. I know. Eleanor said, I am doing this because someone has to be the adult, I said. I opened the document. I turned to the signature page. I wrote my name, Valerie Ross. The lines were sharp and clear. I closed the book and handed it back to her. Good, Eleanor said. She put the book in her bag. She buttoned her coat. Get your things, she said. Where are we going? I asked. We have a meeting, she said. I called a family conference for 2:00. They are all going to be there. They think I'm coming to bail them out. She walked to the door and opened it. The bright sunlight flooded into the dark hallway. I think it is time they met the new landlord, she said. I looked down at my clothes. My jeans were stained with plaster. My shirt was old. I cannot go like this, I said. Eleanor looked at me. She smiled. You are not going as the poor relation. Valerie, she said, you are going as the owner. Wear whatever you want. It is their job to impress you now. I nodded. I grabbed my purse. I grabbed the folder of receipts. I walked out of the house. I didn't look back at the bucket catching the water. I didn't look back at the mattress on the floor. I walked to the black sedan waiting at the curb. The driver opened the door for me. I slid into the leather seat next to my grandmother. The car smelled of expensive leather and silence. Drive, Eleanor said. As the car pulled away, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It was something heavier, something more permanent. It was the feeling of the pillar finally moving, and the roof was about to come crashing down on the people who had forgotten who was holding it up. The meeting took place in the boardroom of the Kingsley Tower in downtown Willowcrest. It was a room made of glass and steel, floating 30 stories above the city, a place where the air conditioning was always set to a temperature that discouraged comfort. My father, Mark, and my mother, Caroline, were already there when I arrived. They were sitting on one side of the long, black table. They looked anxious, but there was still that flicker of entitlement in their eyes. They believed that this was a rescue mission. They believed that Eleanor had called them here to sign a check that would make the banks go away. Logan was pacing by the window, looking pale. He had dark circles under his eyes, the look of a man who had not slept since the margin call came in. When the door opened, they all looked up, expecting just Eleanor. Instead, I walked in first. I was wearing a tailored black suit I had bought the day before. I was not carrying a tray of appetizers. I was not holding a notepad to take minutes. I walked to the other side of the table, the side where the empty chairs were waiting next to the head of the table. Eleanor followed me, walking with a cane she did not really need, her face a mask of granite. Behind her was Mr. Sterling, the lawyer, carrying a stack of files that looked like gravestones. Valerie, my mother asked, her voice confused. What are you doing on that side? Come sit with us. We need to present a united front. I did not answer. I pulled out the chair next to Eleanor's and sat down. Mr. Sterling sat on my other side. He placed the files on the table with a heavy thud. Eleanor sat at the head of the table. She did not offer anyone a drink. She did not ask about the weather. We are here to discuss the liquidation of the Kingsley Venture Capital Fund and the restructuring of the family assets, Eleanor said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried to the corners of the room. Mark leaned forward, putting on his best businessman face. Mother, thank goodness. It has been a misunderstanding. The banks are overreacting to a temporary market dip. If you could just authorize a bridge transfer of, say, $500,000, we can stabilize the positions, and Eleanor raised her hand. Mark stopped talking instantly. There will be no transfer, Eleanor said. The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. Mr. Sterling, please read the findings, Eleanor said. The lawyer opened the first file. On October 15th, Logan Kingsley executed 4 unsecured loan agreements totaling $800,000, using the anticipated assets of the Kingsley Trust as collateral without the authorization of the trustee. Mr. Sterling read, these funds were transferred to 3 separate offshore accounts associated with high-risk cryptocurrency speculation. As of this morning, the value of those accounts is 0. Logan flinched. He slumped into his chair, putting his head in his hands. Mr. Sterling continued, Mark and Caroline Ross acted as guarantors on these loans, pledging their primary residence and their personal investment accounts as security. Due to the default event triggered 48 hours ago, the lenders have initiated foreclosure proceedings on the residence and have frozen all associated accounts. My mother let out a small, strangled cry. They cannot take the house, she whispered. We have lived there for 30 years. You gambled it, Eleanor said coldly, and you lost. But we did it for the family, Mark shouted, slamming his hand on the table. We were trying to build something. We were trying to expand the legacy. You were trying to get rich quick because you are too lazy to work, Eleanor shot back. She turned to Mr. Sterling. The second file, please. Mr. Sterling opened the folder that I had given to Eleanor. He spread the papers out on the table. They fanned out like a deck of cards receipts, bank transfers, emails. This is a forensic accounting of the financial relationship between Valerie Ross and the rest of the family over the last decade. The lawyer said, my parents stared at the papers. They recognized them. They saw the dates. They saw the amounts. It shows a pattern of systematic financial extraction. Mr. Sterling said, Valerie Ross has transferred a total of $142,380 to Mark, Caroline, and Logan Kingsley over a period of 8 years. These transfers were characterized as loans, yet not a single dollar has been repaid. Mark turned to me, his face red. You kept records, he hissed. You were spying on us. I looked him in the eye. I was not spying. Dad, I said, I was surviving. I kept records because I knew one day you would try to rewrite history. I knew one day you would say, I never did enough. Eleanor leaned forward. You took her money. She said to my parents, you took her youth. You took her security. And when I gave her a crumbling house, you laughed at her. You told her she wasn't needed anymore. She paused, letting the words sink in. Well, you were right about one thing. She is not needed by you anymore. But you are certainly going to need her. Eleanor opened the leather-bound document that sat in front of her. Effective immediately, Mark and Caroline are removed from the primary Kingsley Trust, she announced. You are disinherited from the estate. You have proven that if I give you resources, you will only use them to destroy yourselves and drag others down with you. Caroline screamed. It was a raw, ugly sound. No, Mother. You cannot. We are your blood. We are your family. I am protecting the family, Eleanor said. By cutting off the gangrenous limb, Logan looked up, his eyes wet with tears. Grandma, please, he begged. I just wanted to make you proud. I wanted to be a tycoon like you. I did not mean to lose the money. I just wanted to show you I could be great. Eleanor looked at him with pity, but no mercy. You wanted to be rich. Logan, she said, you did not want to be great. Greatness requires work. You spent $50,000 on a launch party for a company that did not have a product. You spent $12,000 on a lease for a car you could not drive. Do not talk to me about pride. You were playing dress-up. She turned to me. Valerie Ross is now the sole executor and co-trustee of the Kingsley estate, Eleanor declared. The room exploded. What Mark shouted, standing up. She is a secretary. She knows nothing about business. She is small-time. She is the only one of you who knows the value of $1 because she is the only one who has ever had to earn it, Eleanor said. She gestured to me. Valerie has full discretion over the assets. Eleanor continued. She has the power to veto any expenditure. She has the power to liquidate any holding, and she has the final say on whether we intervene in your bankruptcy proceedings. My father looked at me with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. You cannot do this. Valerie, He said, "You are the daughter. You are supposed to take care of us. We are your parents." I stood up. I placed my hands flat on the cold table. "I did take care of you." I said, "For 20 years. I paid the electric bill when I was 12. I paid the mortgage when I was 22. I bailed Logan out of jail. I paid for Mom's surgery." I took a breath, and at the party, "You told me my job was done. You told me to leave." I looked at my mother. "You said nobody wants to be around someone who talks about responsibility." I said, "Well, now you have to, because I am the only one left who has any." Caroline burst into tears. She stood up and reached across the table, trying to grab my hand. "Valerie, baby, please," she sobbed. "We are drowning. They are going to take the house. Where will we go? You cannot let your mother live on the street. I changed your diapers. I loved you. Think about the family. It was the ultimate weapon. The guilt, the tears, the manipulation that had worked on me for my entire life." I felt a pang in my chest. I looked at her weeping face, the mascara running down her cheeks. I wanted to fix it. The old instinct was screaming at me to pull out the checkbook, to make the bad feelings go away. But then I looked at the folder of receipts. I looked at the history of my own erasure. I looked at Eleanor, who was watching me intensely. This was the final exam. I looked back at my mother. "I will not let you live on the street," I said. Mark let out a sigh of relief. "See, I knew it. She is a good girl." "But," I continued, raising my voice, "I am not saving the house." The relief vanished from Mark's face. "The house is an asset we cannot afford to rescue," I said, using the cold language of finance they pretended to understand. "It is over-leveraged. Let the bank take it." What Caroline shrieked, "I will authorize the trust to rent a 2-bedroom apartment for you in town." I said, "It will be modest. It will be paid directly to the landlord. You will not touch the money. And my car." Mark asked, "The SUV repossessed." I said, "You can take the bus, or you can get a job and buy a used car like everyone else." "And me?" Logan asked, his voice trembling. "What about my debt? If I don't pay, they will arrest me for fraud." I looked at my brother. "Then we will hire you a lawyer." I said, "A good one, but we will not pay the debt. You will file for personal bankruptcy. You will ruin your credit for 7 years. You will start from zero." "You are a monster," Logan yelled. "You are jealous. You want to see us suffer because you were always the loser in the corner." He lunged toward the table, but Mr. Sterling stood up, blocking him. "Sit down. Mr. Kingsley," the lawyer said. Mark looked at me with pure venom. "You are a traitor." He spat. "You are not my daughter. You are a vindictive little enough." Eleanor slammed her cane on the floor. The sound cracked like a gunshot. She stood up, her eyes blazing. "You call her a traitor?" Eleanor demanded. "After she fed you, after she clothed you." She pointed a shaking finger at Mark. "You are not being punished because you are poor. Mark, you are being punished because you are greedy. You are being punished because you treated my granddaughter like a consumable good. You used her up like a tube of toothpaste and then threw her in the trash when she was empty." She looked at all of them. "Well, she is not empty. She is the only one of you who is full. She is full of integrity, and that is why she sits in this chair. And you sit in the wreckage you made." The room fell silent again. The reality settled over them like a shroud. They had no cards left to play. The money was gone. The power was gone. And the person holding the lifeline was the person they had abused. Caroline slumped in her chair, her sobbing turning into quiet, defeated whimpers. Mark stared out the window, refusing to look at anyone. Logan put his head on the table. I looked at Mr. Sterling. "Draw up the papers for the apartment rental," I said, "and contact the creditors to negotiate a payment plan for the innocent parties, the caterers, the landscapers, the staff they hired. I will not have working people suffer because of my family's vanity. Pay them from the trust. And the family debts," Mr. Sterling asked. I stood up. "The family debts are their own," I said. I turned to Eleanor. "Are we done?" Grandmother Eleanor looked at me with pride. "We are done," she said. I walked out of the boardroom. I did not look back at my parents. I did not look back at my brother. I walked out into the hallway, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel the crushing weight of their expectations. I felt free. 6 months later, the late afternoon sun streamed through the new windows of my house on Maple Street. The peeling wallpaper was gone, replaced by fresh, warm paint. The rotted floorboards had been replaced with solid oak. The roof did not leak. I sat in the living room, pouring tea into 2 cups. Eleanor sat in the armchair, a new one, upholstered in velvet. She looked frail, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "How are they?" she asked, sipping her tea. I put the teapot down. "Dad got a job." I said, "Sales at a car dealership. He hates it, but he is paying the electric bill at the apartment. Mom is volunteering at the library. She complains about the apartment being small, but she sends me a card once a month. And Logan. He is working construction." I said, "It is good for him. He is too tired to scheme. He comes over for dinner on Sundays. We do not talk about money. We talk about football. It is nice." Eleanor nodded. "You save them." "Valerie." She said, "I didn't save them." I said, "I just stopped drowning with them." I looked around my house. It was small. It was modest. But it was solid. It was mine. Victory wasn't about the millions of dollars in the trust fund. I rarely touched that money. I just managed it. Victory was sitting here, in a house that didn't smell of mildew, knowing that if my phone rang, I didn't have to answer it. Victory was knowing that I was no longer the invisible pillar. I was the architect of my own life. I realized then that you can love people without destroying yourself for them. You can love them from a distance. You can love them enough to let them fall, so they can finally learn how to stand up. I took a sip of my tea. It was hot and sweet. I remembered the question Eleanor had asked me the first time she walked into this house. "So this is what they left you?" I smiled. "No," I thought, "this isn't what they left me. This is what I built from the rubble, and it is enough." Thank you so much for listening to Valerie's story of resilience and justice. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening from your kitchen, your car, or maybe while relaxing at home? Please comment below with your location and share your thoughts on the ending. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so more people can hear this story. Your support means the world to us.